sure Eric's.
I'm here, Superintendent.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Boston School Committee. I'm Chairperson Jerry Robinson. The committee just returned from an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the United Steelworkers Local 2936, also known as our bus monitors. Tonight's session is being shared live on Zoom. It will be posted on the school committee's webpage and on YouTube. Tonight's meeting documents are posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee, under the February 4th meeting link. The meeting documents have been translated into all of the major BPS languages. Any translations that are not ready prior to the start of the meeting will be posted as soon as they are finalized. The committee is pleased to offer live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. The Zoom interpretation feature has been activated. Zoom participants should click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to select your language preference. I want to remind everyone to please speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Tonight, we are proud to honor 22 very talented and dedicated teachers who have earned or renewed National Board certification. National Board certified teachers are highly accomplished educators who meet high and rigorous standards. Before I turn it over to Assistant Superintendent for Teacher Leadership and Development, Shakira Ford Walker, to tell us more about the National Board program, I'd like to invite the superintendent to say a few words. Superintendent?
Great, thank you so much, Chair. So tonight, I'm really excited to acknowledge this group of 22 National Board certified teachers, which is up from 16 last year. Some of you are being certified for the first time, and some of you are maintaining your recertification, but all of you are being recognized with our profession's highest achievement. So sincerely, congratulations. This certification is based on rigorous preparation and a thorough peer review process. And I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, and BPS is proud of it. Thank you to our Assistant Superintendent for Teacher Leadership Development, Shakira Ford Walker, for your leadership and support of our educators as they worked toward this important goal. And I also want to thank BTU President Eric Berg for joining us tonight to recognize our teachers. We really are fortunate in BPS to have highly qualified teachers like you in our classrooms serving our students. I want to thank you again for your hard work and contributions to our district. And again, congratulations to all of you. And so with that, Chair, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ms. Ford Walker. Tell us about the program.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Skipper. Good evening, everyone. I am truly delighted to be here this evening to recognize and celebrate our National Board certified teachers. This is a moment of pride for our educators, our district, and most importantly, our students. Achieving National Board certification is an extraordinary accomplishment that directly strengthens student learning and opportunity. For those of you who don't know, the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards was established as the profession's vehicle for defining and recognizing accomplished teaching. At its core, the mission of the National Board is simple, yet profound: to advance the quality of teaching and learning. Here in Boston, this mission comes to life through the strong and enduring partnership between Boston Public Schools and the Boston Teachers Union. Together, we provide a comprehensive support program for candidates, including courses designed to support educators in making instructional improvements, portfolio guidance, reader retreats, and collaborative learning opportunities, all at no cost. Our goal is to expand access to the gold standard of teaching excellence, increase the number of National Board certified teachers in BPS, especially our educators of color. Last year, the Margins to Center grant allowed us to deepen our commitment to equity, access, and teacher leadership. We are grateful to our teacher leaders, cohort leaders, and readers whose dedication makes this work possible. This year, we have about 100 candidates actively pursuing or maintaining certification, and we look forward to welcoming the next cohort in the next school year. As we all know, this work cannot happen alone. I am incredibly grateful for our dedicated and inspiring team of teacher leaders who make this program possible. Their commitment, expertise, and generosity of spirit are truly remarkable. I would like to extend my deepest thanks and appreciation to our National Board leadership team, Asia Crockett, Dr. Kimberly Fraser Booth, Dr. Kristen Cacciatore, Nicole Giordani, and Suzanne Gill, our cohort leaders, and our readers for their tireless efforts to support candidates, advance professional practice, and promote teacher leadership. Your work strengthens teaching across BPS and ultimately improves the learning experience of our students. Thank you, team, for making this work possible. And now it's my pleasure to turn things back over to Chair Robinson as we continue with the recognition ceremony.
Thank you. Eric Berg, President of the Boston Teachers Union, is here with us tonight for this special recognition. Mr. Berg, would you like to say a few words?
I would be so happy to. Thank you, Chair Robinson. Thank you, members of the committee, Superintendent Skipper, Ms. Ford Walker. It is just such a great pleasure every year to join this meeting and congratulate and celebrate the accomplishments of the remarkable individuals who have obtained National Board certification. This year, it's 22, which is, I believe, more than any meeting I've attended in recent years and maybe a record. And I think that's a real credit to the team in BPS, the National Board leadership team that Shakira recognized, and the dozens of current National Board certified teachers who support their colleagues across BPS as cohort leaders, as course facilitators, as on-call readers, and in many cases as a friendly colleague down the hall who's willing to put in the time and work on a teaching practice with a colleague. I know myself, having gone through National Board certification as a teacher, how important it is as a professional development tool. It requires teachers to ask themselves, what do my students need? What do these students need in this moment, at this time, in this area to learn and to grow? And all of the students in Boston Public Schools are better for it. So again, I really want to thank, first of all, the school department for this ongoing partnership that has been going on for a decade or more. Shakira mentioned a federal grant that funded some work, margins to center work that reached out particularly to teachers of color and encouraged them to become certified. Sadly, that grant was canceled by the federal government, and it was a good thing that Boston Public Schools and the BTU maintained their funding to continue that program. Given the budget crisis this year, it's unfortunate that continued funding for this program is on the chopping block, and we do hope that the committee sees a way to maintain this funding and a regular line item going forward, because this initiative really does help our students and our teachers and all of our schools. So once again, congratulations to all the teachers who attained certification newly or completed their maintenance of certification this year. It's really a credit and a tribute to you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. I will now introduce our teachers. When I call your name, please turn on your camera. You can give us a little wave so we can see you. All right, so congratulations to the following teachers who earned or renewed National Board certification. Emma Nalchaljian, Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers, certification area, English Language Arts, Adolescence and Young Adulthood. Timothy McQuaid, Boston Latin School, Mathematics, Adolescence and Young Adulthood. Sarah Fort, Hugh R. O'Donnell Elementary School, Literacy, Reading, Language Arts, Early and Middle Childhood. Shannon Connolly, Mather Elementary School, Generalist, Middle Childhood. Maria Dor Esther Velasquez, Edison Elementary, Music, Early Childhood and Middle Childhood. Jenna Brown, Tech Boston Academy, Exceptional Needs Specialist, Early Childhood through Young Adult mild and moderate disabilities. Anthony Brown, Brighton High School, exceptional needs specialist, early childhood through young adulthood, mild and moderate disabilities. Shelby Cleveland, Up Academy Dorchester, literacy, early childhood, language arts, early and middle childhood. Helen Sullivan, Joseph Hurley K-8 School, English language arts, early adolescence. Emily Silas, the English High School, English as a new language, early adolescence through young adulthood / social studies. Michelle Allman, Boston Day and Evening Academy, mathematics, adolescence and young adulthood. Marjorie Peter, Rafael Hernandez K-8 School, English as a new language, early and middle childhood, specialist path 2, English development specialist. Emily Bletzer, Mildred Avenue K-8, literacy, reading, language arts, early and middle childhood. Joshua Shea, Office of Specialized Service, Related Services, exceptional needs specialist, early childhood through young adulthood, visually impaired. Shannon McCormick, John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science, social studies, history, adolescence, and young adulthood. Sophia Gonzalez, Hugh R. O'Donnell Elementary School, English as English as a new language, early and middle childhood, specialist path 2, English development specialist. Julie Yamin, Roosevelt K-8 School, early adolescent science. Quaisha Clark, Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School, generalist, early childhood. Emmanuel Fairley, Henry Grew Elementary School, generalist, middle childhood. Catherine O'Flaherty, Boston Latin Academy, English language arts, early adolescence. James Heffern, John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science, social studies, history, early adolescence. Deborah White, Mozart Elementary School, English as a new language, early and middle childhood, specialist path 2, English development specialist. Congratulations to all of you. We have citations and pins that we will send out to you. Congratulations again, and thank you for the pride you take in your profession and for your hard work and dedication to raising the level of excellence in our schools and our students.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Great. Okay. We will now begin with the approval of minutes. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January 21st, 2026 school committee meeting as presented. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Pavix, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Present.
yes.
Yes.
Ms. Garrett, Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the superintendent's report. I present to you our superintendent, Mary Skipper.
Great. And thank you, Chair Robinson. Again, congratulations to all those magnificent teachers. So I'll be giving an abbreviated superintendent report tonight due to the preliminary FY27 budget presentation. It's one of our longer ones. But there are a few items that I would like to share before we get into the presentation a little later in the meeting. First off, on Sunday, February 1st, we marked the start of the 100th celebration of Black History Month. BPS joins the nationwide celebration of the countless contributions of African Americans and members of the African diaspora in our communities, our neighborhoods, and our district. Our students, families, educators, and staff will recognize achievement, perseverance, creativity, and joy throughout Black history over the next several weeks at events and celebrations. I look forward to sharing the details of our school's observances at a future school committee meeting. In February, we also highlight several other events, including Career and Tech Education Month, when we spotlight career and college pathways to in-demand careers. This week is also National School Counseling Week, when we recognize and celebrate the important role of BPS school counselors in our students' and families' lives. This year's theme is Amplify Student Success, which is what our school counselors do every day by supporting students' academic achievement, teaching life readiness and interpersonal skills, and helping students plan for the future, including college and career. On February 12th, School Crossing Guard Appreciation Day, excuse me, we will thank our crossing guards for helping to keep our students safe as they travel to and from school. And on February 17th, we will welcome the Year of the Horse during the Lunar New Year. February may be the shortest month of the year, but there are certainly a lot of events and happenings in BPS. Please follow on our social media, on our website, bostonpublicschools.org, where we'll post information, photos, videos, interviews, and so forth throughout the month. We're excited to be able to say that every educator across BPS was able to participate in professional learning yesterday. As many of you know, a highly skilled educator engaging with each of our students is critical to increasing student outcomes and closing the achievement and opportunity gaps. Educators engaged in learning that supported their school community in advancing the goals outlined in their quality school plans and further build capacity regarding inclusion and equitable literacy. We're excited to review the feedback from our educators and will be prepared to share more about this experience at our next early release P-Day, which is scheduled for March 3rd. I want to take a moment to thank our BPS operations teams under the leadership of Deputy Superintendent Sam DePina and Chief of Operations Brian Ford, and the many, many city departments that work closely with us to dig out from the recent snowstorm. It's been a few years since our city has seen a storm and snow accumulation of this magnitude. It took our crews 2 days to ensure that students could return safely. First, I want to acknowledge BPS facilities and our dedicated school custodians for making our school grounds safe for the return of our students. More than 450 facilities department staff, including custodians and ground crews, mobilized to shovel paths and walkways and salt our schools and buildings in the bitter cold for long hours before their regular shift. We also want to thank the BPS transportation staff for coordinating with our partner at Transdev to ensure our buses were ready to go following the storm. Teams of bus drivers, maintenance personnel, and other staff mobilized at all 3 of our bus yards to clear and remove snow and start all of our buses during the sub-zero temperatures to make sure they were operable during the inclement weather. With a return to school on Wednesday, our bus drivers, bus monitors, and transportation staff arrived at the bus yards, some starting prior to 4 a.m. They checked buses, headed out on the road to get our students to and from school safely, demonstrating their continued commitment to serving our community. Additionally, I want to thank our city partners who were responsive to our request to help ensure bus stops and pickup and drop-off locations were clear of snow, among the many priorities of opening and operating a city to help BPS open school for Wednesday. We're grateful to our entire BPS village for pulling together to ensure that our students return to school safely. These tasks take enormous coordination and cooperation, and I just want to thank our families, our parents, our staff for their patience as we continue to manage snow removal. Thank you again to our teams for a job well done, and hopefully we don't have that magnitude of a storm for the rest of the season. I also want to briefly address a news report regarding the Mass Core graduation requirements, the district's academic standard for graduation, beginning with this year's graduating class. Mass Core was first adopted by this committee in May of 2021. And over the past several years, we've been working to ensure that our course coding, standards, and credits align in our secondary schools to meet the BPS Mass Core requirement. Our school teams are actively working directly with students and families to ensure that they're on track to meet the requirements or to help them get back on track if they're behind. Reports that say 1/3 of BPS graduates are at risk of not graduating were based on a data snapshot taken that back in December that doesn't fully capture all the complexity of the work behind the policy's implementation. We continue to ensure that our systems and student transcripts accurately reflect each student's actual graduation progress. In addition, the number of students on track to graduate will continue to increase weekly and monthly as our seniors have more opportunities in the coming months to complete required courses and as we continue alignment and coding of the courses. We do not anticipate a decrease in the number of eligible students for graduation in June of 2026 due to Mass Core. Again, our school leaders are paying close attention to our students' needs and to ensure they meet the requirements to graduate. Every family of a senior received a communication in December outlining where their student was on the graduation track, and families who had questions or still have questions can certainly reach out directly to their school, to their school counselors, or they can contact the district College Career and Life Readiness Office, which is at our website. You can find the link, or it's cclr@bostonpublicschools.org. We'll provide an update to the committee in later March, early April, including the scenarios we believe should qualify certain groups of students for an exemption. Understanding the magnitude of this policy as a graduation requirement, not just a guidance, as I foreshadowed last spring and this fall, I will also ask for action from this committee for the class of 2026 to approve our recommendations for such exemptions. And I think, Chair Robinson, I'm going to hand it back to you as I know we have a pretty big agenda with the budget.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'll now open the floor for questions and discussion. I'd like to remind my colleagues about our agreed upon norm that we each have 5 minutes per member per round, not including district response. Ms. Parvitz will remind us when 1 minute remains and when time is up. Please make sure your questions are on topic, related to the items in the superintendent's report. Other topics not related to the superintendent's report can be raised during new business later in the meeting. Also, please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you in the order I see you. Does anyone have any questions? Dr. Alkins?
Yes, Superintendent, thank you for the report. And this question is not necessarily directly related to something that you've shared, but just wondering if our schools have, in our family community, have had any, felt any impact from the funding freeze that we talked about at our last meeting, and just how we're actually dealing with that.
Sure. We'll actually, within the budget, we'll talk a bit about this, Dr. Alkins, but in general, as we indicated, the freeze was really not directed toward school-based positions or school supplies or classroom instructional supplies. It was really more administrative, managerial, central, with some impact to school and discretionary funds. Any issues that have been raised as we had indicated, from school leaders into regional soups, and then we've worked with the business office to be able to resolve what's come to us. So I think in general, the process that we laid out is going smoothly. We'll get a bit more into the detail as we get into the budget. Thank you for that question.
Anyone else? Just want to say thank you for your update with regard to the issues around Mass Core, and we look forward to hearing more in the next meetings around how this will play out for our students this year. If there are no other comments, I'd like to entertain a motion to receive the superintendent's report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett, Mr. Torres, Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The superintendent's report is approved.
Thank you. We will now move on to general public comment. Ms. Parvex?
Thank you, Chair. The public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to address the school committee on school-related issues. Questions on specific school matters are referred to the superintendent. Questions on policy matters may be discussed by the committee later. The meeting will feature 2 public comment periods, with the first comment period limited to 1 hour. After 1 hour, anyone who hasn't testified will have the opportunity to do so at the end of the meeting. We have 26 speakers this evening. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please feel free to email your comments for distribution to the committee. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. The time that an interpreter uses for English interpretation will not be deducted from a speaker's allotted time. Please direct your comments to the chair and refrain from addressing individual school committee members or district staff. Please note, the comments of any public speaker do not represent the Boston Public Schools or the Boston School Committee. Please state your name, affiliation, and where you live before you begin. Please sign in Zoom using the name you registered with for public comment, and be ready to unmute and turn on your camera when it's your turn to speak. Please raise your virtual hand when I call your name. And to support interpretation, please speak slowly and clearly. Our first group of speakers is Janelle Lamons, Robin Williams, Jessica Butler, Rosie Hosking, Stephanie Golas, and Matt McCloskey. Janelle Lamons. Janelle Lamons, please accept the prompt.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, can you please start the video?
Okay. Hi, my name is Janelle Lamont, and I want to bring up about a situation regarding a 32-year-old woman who pretended to be a student at 3 different Boston public schools. My questions to the superintendent, Mary Skipper: what changes have you guys made since this incident has happened? And what is the changes to the enrollment process as well? I feel like the Boston Public Schools has dropped the ball without answering any of my questions that I've been having since 2023, and I am requesting to have a meeting with the superintendent along with Mayor Wu beside from this meeting. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Robin Williams. Please accept the prompt.
Hello?
Hi, please turn on your camera. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robin Williams. I am Janelle Vivian Lamont's, she's my daughter. I'm basically, I have basically the same question as my daughter, but my main concern is how did this happen with this young lady, Shelby Hewitt? How did she enter into BPS? As in the beginning, when I came down there, I spoken to I forgot the lady's name, but she worked in administration, and kind of find out a letter had went out to all the parents, and at that time, my daughter had transferred, and we didn't get that letter. So I felt that BPS has definitely dropped the ball, and there was no transparent when the when they forgot to tell the parent, they forgot to email the parents who the kids that transferred out of from the Burke school. And on top of that, the BPS did not offer counseling to all the students that was involved with Shelby Hewitt.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jess Butler.
Hi.
Hi, you can start.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jess Butler from Dorchester, a Henderson parent. We have a first grader with an IEP. I'm here tonight to share our experience with the placement process and request changes. Placements have always been part of the IEP team meeting process. Last year, I started to hear of parents being told to go to the Welcome Center instead of meeting with their student's IEP team. Folks were rightfully concerned because the system did not have the capability of recognizing the nuances of each student's needs, but instead relied on a location as the only determining factor. We're now experiencing the same situation. Every student has variations in how their disabilities impact their access to education, which is why having a team who's worked with our child through one regression should decide the best setting for him, not his address. Having a classroom without a special ed dual licensed teacher is not inclusion. Having a child go to a school because it was selected by an algorithm is not inclusion. BPS labeling every school an inclusion school does not make it inclusive. We've been told by multiple schools that they're still working out how the inclusion model will look for next year. Having our son attend a school that's not appropriate fit for his educational need, determined by his IEP, is setting him up for a regression. This model will create a cohort of students who will not have their IEPs met, who will not be supported toward success. Those students will be labeled as needing more services and will be transferred to more restrictive settings. This placement system will create gaps and leave students behind. As a policy, using the Welcome Center as the point where placement is determined feels negligent and counter to all that an IEP is, services and placement. The policy was never distributed in writing to
30
parents
seconds.
and teachers. Having the Welcome Center determine placement is using the loophole that BPS now offers all-inclusive seats. As a reminder, for fiscal year 2027, grades 3, 4, and 11 will just start with inclusion, and grades 5, 6, and 12 won't start until fiscal year 2028. Teams should be making placement decisions, not the geographical locations. Let the team, which includes parents and guardians, make the appropriate choice for their student. And also, please remember the commitment the school committee made to the community regarding the closing schools and support all of the students that will be given transfers.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rosie Hoskin.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I'm Rosie Hosking. I have two girls at the Sarah Roberts. Last year, we asked you not to cut the budget for our merging school with treasured bilingual staff at risk, right when we opened a dual language strand. Thank you for hearing us and helping save some of those positions last year. But here we are 1 year later with the same request. The next round of cuts to discretionary positions includes 4 of our paras and an inclusion coach. These cuts will leave our inclusion teachers on their own for portions of the day. My daughter with ADHD was denied accommodations in first grade as she was not failing enough, despite being below grade level on reading and math. With Sumner's discretionary reading specialists providing support for any kid who needed it, she was able to reach grade level within a year. She does now have a 504. There are neurodiverse gen ed kids like my daughter in every BPS school. Don't make them fail first with inadequate support and then put the onus on parents to prove they need legally mandated help, which is more expensive to BPS. Don't lump high needs kids into one classroom so that on paper compliance is met. Listen to the BTU and staff the classrooms adequately so that every kid gets what they need to excel. How to pay for it? One idea. Transportation costs $200 million a year. And let's be clear, it does not do what it is supposed to do in the name of equity. Let our kids go to schools near their houses and/or enable and incentivize walking, biking, and public transport and reallocate some of that funding.
Thank you. Your time is up. Our next speaker is Stephanie Golas.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Golas, BPS librarian and parent to 2 Sarah Roberts elementary students. I'm testifying today to implore you to uncouple the budget from falling enrollment, much of which is due to the current political climate and the cruel direct actions of the current administration. We must find a way to support our students, teachers, and families without punishing them and fund our schools appropriately in these unprecedented times. This is a short-term hole that can be filled. The city and the district must seriously look inward to where funds can be recovered from places that are not direct student services and support. I ask, has the city looked into pilot funding? Has serious thought been given to redundancies and multiple levels of administration in the central office? Transportation is eternally a huge component of the budget, and we should think seriously about how we take buses off the road, let students attend schools close to their homes, and save millions of dollars in the budget. Communities like Sarah Roberts have done their part by merging school buildings and are still being asked to lose more. Cuts cannot come in the form of loss of paraprofessionals, programming, classroom and student support, and mental health services. These are non-negotiable and vital to our students' success and well-being at Sarah Roberts and at all BPS buildings. In difficult times such as this, our most vulnerable students are so often made to pay the price by losing paraprofessionals, family liaisons, and behavioral support. Students only get one chance at their current age and grade, so losses now for students cannot be made up later. This is the time for the district, city, and state to step up to invest in our students and to make sure that we don't add to the harm being inflicted at the federal level. Families will leave Boston in even greater numbers when our schools lose teachers, outdoor time, recreation, and enrichment. Our teachers, school staff, and paraprofessionals are amazing, but they cannot do the job of 2 and 3 people and do their jobs well. I implore you to not make direct cuts to student supports and programming, preserve vital services, and in this next year's budget. Schools like Sarah Roberts cannot weather $600,000 cuts.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt McCloskey. Matt McCloskey, please accept the prompt.
My name is Matthew McCloskey. I'm a father to a BPS student also at the Sarah Roberts, which is a newly merged school, still in its first year of operation in its current form. I'm testifying tonight to plead with you to reconsider the current cuts that will cause lasting damage based on what we all hope is a short-term crisis. Current cruel government policies are having an outsized impact on our schools, with the greatest number of immigrant families who are most in need of support right now. In fact, these cuts seem almost specifically targeted to harm those most in need. For our school, the current proposed budget cuts of $600,000 are going to pit primarily paraprofessionals, support staff, the members of the school community that at any time are crucial to support most in need children and families, and are especially crucial right now. In addition, in our school, these cuts are coming 1 year after many of us fought to retain these amazing educators and staff, many of whom are people of color and lower means. Through the harsh process of a messy merger, and they are the people who have invested sweat equity to build our new and delicate school community. These cuts based on short-term shocks to immigrants' communities are going to have long-term lasting harms as we lose talented and caring staff. I urge the committee to recognize these are extraordinary circumstances and find funding at the state level to bridge the gap until longer-term, more sustainable solutions can be found to address the needs of our most vulnerable students and community members. Additionally, it's frustrating to beg for our amazing staff to not get fired every year. I want to know if the school committee can respond to what they hear from us in these public comment sessions. It often feels like these comments get lost into the void. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next group of speakers, our next speakers are John Mudd, Ursula Alston, and Shell Buckman.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Mudd.
My name is John Mudd. I'm a resident of Cambridge, a longtime education advocate in Boston, and the grandfather of a student at the John F. Kennedy School in JP. There will be many difficult decisions facing you and all of us in implementing the cuts in the school year 2027 budget. I want to briefly highlight a major concern about the potential impact of the anticipated staff reductions on the critical issue of teacher diversity in race and language and what you could do about it. The school committee and BPS are committed to the policy of making the diversity of teachers reflect the diversity of students. We have all supported this goal, but BPS has made little progress in the past 2 decades in reaching this goal. While Black students are now 29% of students, the latest data I have show only 23% of Black teachers, which is even below the 25% that Judge Garrity ordered in 1974. For Latinos, the gap is even worse, with 44% Latino students and only 12.1% Latino teachers. The proposed budget reportedly calls for a reduction of 300 to 400 positions. The threat to diversity is due to the fact that cuts in staff often fall most heavily on Black, Latino, and Asian or bilingual staff who are the last hired and therefore the first fired. That is what the current BTU contract calls for in the case of teachers, despite a recent effort by
30
the state to
seconds.
protect staff diversity in the case of layoffs. However, my understanding is the seniority provision applies to permanent teachers. It does not apply to provisional teachers who may actually bear the brunt of the layoffs. Therefore, I would recommend the school committee and the superintendent give budget guidance to school leaders to make every effort to protect as many Black, Latino, Asian, and bilingual teachers as possible in implementing their projected staffing cuts and
Thank you,
enforce
Mr. Mudd.
this in the probable org meetings. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Our next speaker is Ursula Alston. You can start.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ursula Alston. I am a mother of a Boston Public School student, a Roxbury resident, and a parent mentor coordinator from St. Stephen's at the Roger Clapp School. I am here today to formally submit the results of a petition signed by 590 families representing 86 schools across BPS. These results show the urgent and citywide demand for bilingual education. Of the families who signed, 30% are requesting bilingual programs in Spanish. Others are requesting programs in Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean, Arabic, French, Chinese, Somali, Portuguese, Vietnamese, American Sign Language, and Korean. Altogether, these reflects the incredible logistics diversity of our city. This demand sends a clear message. Multilingualism is a reality in Boston, but our school system is not yet fully reflecting or supporting it. We are families, educators, and community members calling for the development and funding of a 10-year plan to ensure that every BPS student receives support in their home language and has access to high-quality bilingual programs, including students with disabilities. Every family who wants this opportunity should be able to see their children graduate proficient in at least 2 languages. Investing in bilingual education improves academic outcomes, helps retain families in BPS, and strengthens the economic future of our city. It is time for Boston to lead by example and ensure that every child belongs and has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you, and I have sent the petition to you guys earlier today.
Thank you very much. Yes, we got the petition.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cheryl Buckman.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Buckman. I'm the parent to a seventh grade student at the Ruth Batson Academy and parent lead for the Dever in Dorchester, a resident in South Boston. I am here tonight because yesterday Boston Public Schools Transportation failed my son once again. My son, who is assigned to the route HS 491, now mind you, he is autistic and has ADHD, which means consistency, routine, and clear communication are not optional. They are essential to his safety. Yesterday, his bus was scheduled to pick him up at school at 11:50 a.m. The bus never came. There was no text messages, no phone call, no update on the tracking app. When I did call transportation at 11:55 yesterday morning, I was told that drivers were still bidding on their routes and they would be starting within the hour. That is unacceptable. In the middle of the school day, the district did not know how or who was responsible for transporting my child who is on an IEP. Because there was no clear communication about whether this bus was coming or not, I was forced to leave my ill mother alone at home and travel to go pick him up myself. No parent should have to make that choice because of a system failure. Families are told every year that transportation issues are being fixed. Yet, parents are still left without information and student
30 seconds.
information, especially with those with disabilities. I'm asking for these three things. Firstly, immediate accountability for why HS 491 had zero coverage. Secondly, a fail-safe communication protocol so this doesn't happen again. And thirdly, a guarantee that students with disabilities are prioritized in transportation planning, not treated as an afterthought. Our child's safety is not a
Thank you.
logistical problem. It's your responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. The next group of speakers will all need support with a Spanish interpreter. We will call your name. Please remember to speak slowly and let the interpreter
Hablen
do the interpretation.
despaciosamente para que el intérprete pueda.
Sorry, Juan, please go ahead.
Bueno, vamos a proceder ahora con las personas que van a dar el testimonio en español.
Jessica Oyer, Anabel Tavares de Peña, Fátima Peña, Cintia Soto, Carolina Soto. Jessica Oyer. Por favor, levante las manos. Jessica Oyer.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches, pueden comenzar.
Good
Mi,
evening,
nom-
everyone.
mi
Vale
nombre
hablando,
es,
señora, despacioso y yo le interpreto. Adelante.
okay. Mi nombre es Jessica Oyer, soy de la vecindad de Dorchester.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Oyer. I live in the Dorchester community.
Soy madre de dos niños que asisten a la escuela bilingüe Hurley School.
I'm a mother of two children that they go to the Hurley School.
Y también soy madre mentora en esta escuela.
I also have to say that I'm a mentor mother in this particular school.
Trabajo con estudiantes de sexto grado y a través de mi experiencia diría que he podido ver la importancia de ser bilingüe dentro del salón de clases.
I do work at the sixth grade. I do have to say that based on my expertise and experience, I know the importance of the bilingualism in this class settings.
En mi clase hay estudiantes que no son bilingües, pero hablan y leen y escriben español.
In my class, I have students that are not bilingual. However, they have the ability to read and speak in Spanish.
Esto demuestra que el aprendizaje de dos idiomas benefician a todos los estudiantes y les abre más oportunidades.
That clearly shows that is very beneficial being bilingual. And not only that, it opens up opportunities for them in their future.
El programa bilingüe fortalece a la comunidad entre la escuela y las familias.
That bilingual program strengthens the community and all the links that exist between communities and families.
Y motiva a los padres a involucrarse más en la educación de sus hijos.
It also motivates the parents to get more involved in their children's education.
Ser bilingüe no solo es aprender un idioma más, sino aprender a respetar a otras culturas.
I have to say also that being bilingual is not only speaking an additional language, it involves also having the ability to respect different cultures.
Es crecer junto como comunidad. Por eso considero que el programa bilingüe es muy importante para el éxito de nuestros estudiantes.
It is also, it means growing as a community. So that is the reason why that I do consider that a bilingual program, it is very beneficial to our students.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Annabelle and Fatima are not in the meeting. Cynthia Soto. Cynthia Soto.
Cintia Soto, pase el micrófono, por favor. Hable despacio para que se le pueda interpretar. Adelante.
Seems like Cynthia Soto is not in the meeting. Carolina Soto.
Carolina Soto, pase el micrófono, por favor.
Cynthia Soto is in the meeting, sorry.
¿Me escuchan?
Cintia Soto, sí, adelante, por favor, señora, hable despacio, frases cortas y yo lo voy interpretando. Adelante.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Cynthia Soto.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Soto.
Soy mamá de 3 estudiantes de las escuelas públicas de Boston y vivo en Allston, Massachusetts.
I'm a mother of 3 students. They go to Boston Public Schools and I do live in Allston, Massachusetts.
Hablo hoy como madre y como parte de esta comunidad quiero pedir que sigan abriendo más escuelas bilingües.
I am speaking not only as a mother, but as part of this community that I am. So I'm advocating for the opening of more bilingual schools.
Estas escuelas ayudan a nuestros hijos a crecer con confianza, respeto y más oportunidades.
I have to say that these bilingual schools will help our students grow with more confidence on themselves, with more respect and more opportunities in their futures.
He visto en mis propios hijos cómo aprenden 2 idiomas, lo hace sentirse orgullosos y capaces.
I've seen the pride by which they show that learning 2 languages makes them more confident and more capable. I have seen that in person.
También soy madre mentora del programa de San Steven y es muy importante que sigan apoyando el financiamiento, el Parent Mentor Program.
I also have to say that I'm a mother of the St. Stephen's organization. That's why I'm advocating here for the financing, the continued funding of those bilingual students.
Porque ayuda a que las familias participemos más y estemos más conectadas con las escuelas.
Because this, in turn, helps that families could be more helpful and they will be more connected with the communities.
Yo soy un ejemplo de cuán feliz me siento de ser parte de la escuela de mis hijos y apoyar a los maestros que tanto trabajan.
And a vivid example of how happy I am to help in that particular school. Not only that, also be able to support the hard work that every teacher has on a daily basis.
Les pido que inviertan en más escuelas bilingües y que asignen más fondos para el Parent Mentor Program para el año 2026-2027.
So I'm advocating for the opening of more bilingual schools and to continue in supporting the Parent and Mentor Program for the years of 26-27.
Esto es invertir en nuestras familias y en el futuro de nuestros niños. Muchas gracias.
That is investing in our families and in the future of our children. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Carolina Soto.
Carolina Soto, pase el micrófono,
Sí.
por favor. Va hablando despacio y yo lo voy interpretando.
Ok. Muy buenas noches. Mi nombre es Carolina Soto.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carolina Soto. I am from...
Soy del sector Dorchester. Tengo un niño en el BPS.
I do live in Dorchester and my kid goes to the Boston Public Schools.
Soy coordinadora del programa Paremento de la organización San Steven en la escuela Trotter.
I am a coordinator at the Trotter School of the Parent Mentor Program at St. Stephen's.
Hoy estoy aquí no solo como parte de una comunidad escolar, sino como madre y como alguien que cree profundamente que la educación se construye con la familia, no sin ella.
I am here not only as part of the community, I'm here as a mother, not only as part of the community, and supporting the fact that education is built not only as a mentor, but as a family as well.
La educación cambia cuando las familias se sienten bienvenidas, escuchadas, valoradas. Es ahí donde el programa de Pare Mentor hace la diferencia.
So education becomes much stronger when families are heard, when families are feel valued. And that is when the program makes a real difference, when people are heard and valued.
Hubo un momento en mi vida en el cual me encontraba sin trabajo, sin saber el idioma inglés, no sabía qué hacer y encontrar este programa me ayudó a tener un horizonte.
I have to say there was a moment in my time, in my life, that I was out of work, did not have work. I did not speak the language itself, English. And I have to say that this particular program helped me to find the horizon I was looking for, the Parent Mentor Program.
Poder estar involucrada en las decisiones de la educación de mi hijo y poder apoyarlo en su educación me hace muy feliz y lo hace a él muy orgulloso.
That is having the ability to be part of decision making, to be able to support the education of my kid, which in turns makes him very proud.
Este programa no solo abre puertas laborales, también abre camino y crecimiento, donde hoy estamos preparados para convertirnos en mejores personas.
So this particular program not only opened doors, but it promotes the opportunity for growth, preparing everybody, including ourselves and myself, to become a better person.
El programa de Padre Mentors es el puente entre la escuela y el hogar. Cuando una familia se siente valorada, se siente apoyada, los estudiantes se sienten más fortalecidos.
I have to say that this parent mentor program, it is critical. It's not only the bridge between school and home, it is an opportunity to value the parents, to support them so they can feel valued and supported in the process.
Por eso hoy le pido que sigamos apoyando a más escuela bilingüe, como dice nuestra petición, y fortaleciendo a
30
programas.
segundos.
That is precisely why my call today is to continue supporting the opening of bilingual school and continue strengthening the opportunities ahead in this regard.
Apoyando programas como San Steven de Padre Mentor, apoyamos a la familia y apoyamos a los estudiantes.
So by being able to support this particular program at St. Stephen's, a great program, a parent mentor program, we are supporting ourselves and we are supporting our families.
Cuando apoyamos a los estudiantes, todos ganamos.
When we support our students, I have to say everybody wins. It's a win-win situation.
Porque creamos líderes y jóvenes independientes para un mejor mañana.
Because we are creating leaders and young leaders that are prepared for the challenges that they have to confront tomorrow.
Gracias por escuchar y gracias por creer en nuestra comunidad.
Thank you very much for listening to what I had to say, and thank you very much for believing in our communities.
Gracias, señor Soto. Our three next speakers, Mariani Romero, Dora Sandoval, and Nicole Nikki. The two last people are not in the meeting, so Mariani Romero.
Señora Mariana Romero, tiene la palabra. Pase el micrófono, por favor. Mariana Romero.
Sí, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, la podemos escuchar. Puede proceder, hable despacio y yo lo voy interpretando. Adelante, por favor.
Señora Romero, ¿puede encender la cámara, por favor?
Prenda la cámara para que se le pueda observar.
Está encendida.
Chair, I think there's a problem with the camera. Ok, puede proceder.
Parece que tenemos un problema con la cámara. Adelante, va pausando y yo lo voy interpretando.
Ok. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Mariani Romero.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mariani Romero.
Soy del vecindario de Roslindale.
I do live in the neighborhood of Roslindale.
Soy madre mentora en la escuela Hurley a través del programa San Steven.
I am a mother mentor at the Hurley School through the St. Stephen's program.
Hoy quiero compartir desde mi experiencia personal como madre y lo valioso que ha sido para mi familia contar con una escuela bilingüe.
I would like to share my experiences not only as a mother, but how important it has been, this experience for me and for my family as a family, how valuable that has been.
Tengo una niña de 10 años, muy inteligente, que asiste a la escuela que mencioné anteriormente, ya que es una escuela bilingüe.
I have a 10-year-old daughter. She is very intelligent, very smart, and she goes to a school that I mentioned previously, the Hurley School.
Su primer idioma es el español y aunque eso es una fortaleza, también le ha presentado algunos retos para desarrollarse académicamente.
I have to say that her first language is Spanish. It is a strength in itself, but at the same time, it has presented challenges that had impeded her academic development.
Un ejemplo de esto es cuando mi hija tiene que tomar un examen, ya sea de matemáticas en el idioma inglés.
A good example that I'm able to provide is when she has to take a math test in English.
Muchas veces no es que ella no sepa la respuesta, sino que se le hace difícil porque no es su primer idioma.
It is not that she's not able to provide an answer to the math question. It is simply that being taking the test in English, it is difficult because it is not her first language.
Esto puede ser muy frustrante para un niño, ya que el niño sabe la respuesta, pero se le dificulta.
So that I have to say that is very frustrating. It could be potentially very frustrating for a student that they might know what the answer is, but it is difficult because the test is taken not in their native language.
Gracias a que mi niña asiste a una escuela bilingüe, ella puede tener respaldo y ayuda de los maestros cuando se le presentan estas situaciones.
Whenever any challenge or impediment arises, the fact that she's going to a bilingual school, she has the support of the teachers there when this type of challenges arise, the linguistic challenges.
Entonces yo me pregunto,
Segundos.
¿qué pasa con estos niños que por el vecindario donde viven no tienen acceso a escuela bilingüe?
So the question I have to ask all of us today present in this meeting, what is going to happen to all the students that do not have access to a bilingual school?
Yo estoy aquí para pedir que parte del presupuesto escolar sea dirigido a abrir más escuelas bilingües en todo Massachusetts.
So part of my call today, I'm here present to ask for the opening of more bilingual schools, that the budget allocates the proper funds to open more bilingual schools throughout Massachusetts.
No solo para niños latinos, sino para niños angloparlantes, ya que esto le abre más oportunidades y mejor futuro.
Not only for the Latino kids, but for everybody, for the English speakers as well, because that will present many more opportunities and a much better future for all the populations.
Invertir en las escuelas bilingües es invertir en equidad, en
Ye-
inclusión y en el
Gracias,
futuro de
señora.
todos nuestros niños.
Ya se
Investing
le
in
acabó la.
bilingual schools, it is we're talking about supporting equity and inclusion and a better future for every kid here in the state.
Gracias, señora. Ya se le acabó el tiempo. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Juan, for your support.
Very
Our
welcome,
next,
lady.
our next two speakers will need support in Haitian Creole. So if the Haitian Creole interpreter can come out of their channel, please. The two speakers
Hello.
are David Baptiste and Eliante Abichet.
Nous allons entendre David Jean-Baptiste avec Eliane Abichet qui va parler. David Jean-Baptiste en première, s'il vous plaît, parlez en phrase courte, permis interprétation. David Jean-Baptiste.
Please accept the prompt.
Acceptez pour capable parler. Retirez tête ou sous silence. Mettez caméra ou pour capable commencer à parler. David Jean-Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste, can you turn on your camera?
Li men kamera ou.
Mr. Baptiste declined to be a panelist, so we will continue with the next speaker.
Okay.
Eliante Abichet.
Eliane Abichet, se koupa ou, li men kamera ou, et retire tête ou sous silence, parler en phrase courte, permettre interprétation.
Bonsoir.
Good evening.
Non pa mse Elian, mwen habite Hyde Park.
My
Mwen
name
se
is
yon parent Matahan.
My name is Eliane. I live in Hyde Park. I am a parent of Manahan.
Mwen nan program parameter St. Stephen.
I am in the parent mentor program at St. Stephen's.
Program parameter a chanje la vi nan kominote nou. Mwen menm ak lot parent nou te senti nou izole.
The mentor parent program changes the lives of people in our community because myself and my friends, we were isolated.
Santi po, men le nou jwen program mentor a, li ba nou zouti pou nou travay. Ak pitit nou en collaboration avec professeur pitit nou.
But when we found that mentor program, it equipped us with the tools where we can help our children alongside the teachers or professors.
Et même aider l'autre parent qui nan même situation avec nous.
And it also helps other parents who are in the same situations as we are.
Li vraiment important pour nous comprendre programme ça pas seulement yon aide pour quelques familles, mais li bâti communauté tout.
It's really important that you understand this program is not just a help for a few family, but it also build community as well.
Les parents yo plus préparé, petit yo réussi plus. Et l'école yo marche plus bien.
When the parents are more prepared, the kids, they succeed best and the schools work better as well.
Et puis tout, communauté nou a bien fonctionné.
And just the same, the community will function best.
Moi encourager nous pour nous bay plus ressources et garantir que programme nan dire.
I encourage you to give more resources and guarantee that this program will continue.
Ça c'est un investissement qui pote retour durable pour tout ti moun ak famille nan communauté a.
This is an investment that will bring long-lasting benefit or for all the family and the community alike.
Merci, passez bonne soirée.
Thank you and have a good night.
Merci. Thank you very much. Thank you, Magdalene. Our next we have two speakers left, Imaris Matias and Deidre Manning. Imaris Matias.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Maris Matias, and I live in South End with my two kids. My son is a sophomore at the O'Brien Mathematics Science School. As well, I'm a former student of BPS, and lately I became a paraprofessional. The reason that I'm here today is to talk about the school budget cuts at the schools. I like to take in consideration how important is the budget at the schools to give a good quality education. Keep in mind, it is important instead of taking away any funds and make use of the budget to provide programs that will help or English learners, special needs kids, and get bilingual programs properly done. Please do not cut school budgets, or you need the best education that we can provide. It makes me worry that what will happen if the programs, because of the budget cutting, will not have the service they required, especially for bilingual students. As well, the need of the social emotional support that our youth needs, or what is happening with ICE separating families, is a fear that our youth live with. Our kids need the much support they can have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Deidre Manning. Deidre Manning.
Good evening. My name is Deirdre Manning. I'm a Dorchester resident, single parent of two public school children, and a former Henderson parent who is still shocked at how the school committee voted to abandon some of the most vulnerable members of our community. I'm here today to speak to you about exam school policy and equity. BPS students are required to take the school that they get through the exam school selection process, and they automatically lose the seat at their current school. You have wait lists. So students should have the opportunity to evaluate whether or not the exam school they end up getting, which may not necessarily be their first choice, and whether they want to stay at the school where they currently attend. I also want to point out that the United States Census has released the American Community Survey data, and why don't we have tier maps up so that people who are involved in the admission process can have some sense as to whether or not there's even a chance that their child may be admitted. While they did make some changes to the former exam school policy that removed the process that eliminated kids who were non-Title I students, there still are some problems where the actual implementation of the exam school policy is heavily biased against non-BPS students. For example, fifth graders at Boston Public Schools receive standards-based grades. The district has decided to use a special conversion formula for those who only have standard-based grades in BPS. If they're not going to allow it to be used for non-BPS students, they shouldn't allow it to be used for BPS fifth graders. I don't understand why we have stark differences. Please, please, please make this process, the actual implementation, equitable for all students who are members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to try with David Batiste again, as seemed like he was having technical issues. So if our Haitian Creole interpreter can come back on. And David Batiste, can you please accept the prompt? Magdalene, are you there? I don't hear the Haitian Creole interpreter. Magdalene or Nadege can please come on. I see that Nadege unmuted. Can you please be taken out of the...
So what did you say?
Oh, is this Nadege?
Yeah, it's me.
Thank you. Can you please, we are calling David.
Okay, David.
David Batiste, if he can start.
David Baptiste, est-ce capable de commencer à parler?
If he can turn on his camera and unmute himself.
Ok, David, moi c'est interprète, est-ce capable de parler écoute, ok, et puis retirer sur caméra, et puis retirer sur mute pour capable de parler. David ou là, ou tandem? David,
You need to unmute yourself.
David ou supposé retirer son mute pour capable parler. David, est-ce que vous entendez?
Sí, ¿me escuchan? Buenas noches.
Oh, ok. Ah, usted necesita interpretación en español.
Sí, yo no soy David, soy Dora Sandoval.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, I apologize for this. So we need Spanish interpretation for Dora Sandoval.
Hola, sí, señora Dora Sandoval, disculpe la confusión, yo soy el intérprete. Puede empezar, hable despacio para que se le pueda interpretar. Adelante.
Sí, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Dora Sandoval. Vivo en la comunidad de Roxbury. Soy coordinadora del programa Parents Mentor en la escuela Hurley.
Good evening, everyone. My name is
Bonsoir,
Dora
moi c'est Dora
Sandoval.
Sandoval.
I live in the Roxbury community. I'm a parent mentor, part of the Hurley School. Adelante, vaya despacio, adelante.
Desde hace 2 años tengo
Moi
el
c'est
privilegio de trabajar de cerca con un grupo de madres mentoras.
So for the past couple of years, I had the opportunity to work in a close relationship with a group of parent mentors, mother mentors.
Quienes trabajan diariamente dentro del salón de clases.
And they do their daily work inside of the classrooms, and I have the opportunity to interact with them on a daily basis.
Nuestro trabajo no es solo de apoyar, es un compromiso real con la educación, la inclusión y el bienestar de los estudiantes.
So our job is not only to support the classrooms inside, we have to do inclusion work, education, and to support every student's education as well. That is what we do.
Al estar presente en los salones, vivimos de primera mano las necesidades reales de los maestros y los niños.
We experience firsthand by being able to be present in the classrooms, inside of the classroom, and be able to notice the needs, the real needs that students or teachers have on a daily basis.
Creemos profundamente en la inclusión dentro del salón. Sin embargo, también hemos podido ver que muchas veces no se cumple la promesa de contar con un maestro titular, un paraprofesional y un profesional, uno que trabaje uno a uno en cada salón.
So we do believe that there's an opportunity of inclusion in this particular settings and classrooms. However, that promise of having the professionals being present, being that the professionals, the one-to-one assistant, and every professional that has to be present, that promise is not always kept.
Como debería de ser para lograr una inclusión efectiva.
The way it is supposed to be able to have a full inclusion.
Cuando faltan estas figuras esenciales en los salones, somos las madres mentoras quienes cubrimos esos espacios, apoyando a los maestros y ayudando a los estudiantes.
So when this credentialed professionals are absent, the paraprofessionals, the one-to-one support that exists in the classes, it is our job as mother mentors, our responsibility to fill out this space that is vacant, not having the professionals present in order to be able to support the students.
Para que nadie se quede detrás. Lo hemos hecho con compromiso y con
30
amor,
segundos.
pero es importante decirlo con claridad. No debería recaer en las familias el cubrir la falta de profesores en los salones.
So I have to say, it is our intention as mother mentors to not leave any child behind. We do it with love and with a lot of dedication as well. However, I do have to clear, it is not only the responsibility of the mother mentors or the mentors, if that is the case, to be able to supply or to do the work that the other professionals have to do to be able to have a full inclusion environment.
Por eso hoy quiero pedirles respetuosamente a este comité que incluyan en el presupuesto la contratación de más para profesionales, maestros y profesionales uno a uno que trabajen dentro del salón de clases.
precisely why I'm asking for the inclusion and being part of the budget, the hiring of paraprofessionals and one-to-one educators and teachers and all the professionals that can support that inclusion education. That is my call today.
Muchas gracias. Ya se acabó su tiempo. Muchas gracias. Chair, that concludes public comment for today.
Thank you, Ms. Parvex, and thank you to those of you who spoke this evening and shared your perspectives. Your testimony is very important to us. We have 2 action items related to grants department this evening. The first item is the grants for approval, totaling $326,134. The section action item for tonight is the in-kind donation with a total estimated value of $2,400. I'd now like to turn it over to Superintendent to walk us through the grants and the in-kind donation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. So there are 4 grants for your consideration tonight, totaling more than $326,000. The largest is a more than $191,000, it's a little over that, which is an increase to Mass Step for continuing a competitive grant for the current school year, serving 50 students in adult ed. The purpose of this grant is to provide ESL and job training classes to adult multilingual learners. The remaining $135,000 in funding includes a $50,000 early college planning grant serving more than 100 students in early college programs district-wide. The grant will provide planning resources for early college applicants seeking in Massachusetts early college designation. There's also a $50,000 new competitive Bar Foundation Telescope Network Research Planning Grant. This will serve approximately 4,000 teachers district-wide in the current school year. This grant supports the design and development of a rigorous quantitative and qualitative study of the impacts of the Telescope Network programming on educator mindsets and student outcomes. And there's a $35,000 Career Connected Learning Program Development Grant serving 60 students and 3 staff at Madison Park Vocational Technical High School. This grant will fund technology and materials for a new construction craft laborer program. As Chair also indicated, there is in-kind donation. It's a generous in-kind donation of 80 cases of Crayola crayons to the Countdown to Kindergarten program from MFS Investment Management, worth $2,400 for your consideration. I know that one makes Chair smile. We ask the school committee to approve these grants and this in-kind donation.
Thank you. I'll now open it up to questions and comments from the committee. Dr. Alkins.
Thank you. And with the adult education grant, do we just have a history of how successful this program has been in the past, enough to consider just the benchmarks that they're putting in the grant itself?
Yeah, I think in general, our adult ed is seen as, within the state a leader, and I think that's actually the genesis for why it's getting the increase in the continuation. We see it as really foundational as well because we do have students who actually accessed adult ed even as young as 16, 17 years old.
Well, it just makes me just also think about how, as we are like educating the entire learning, like learning pathway, from childhood to adulthood, just thinking about how we're also just like advertising and marketing the success of what our adult education programs are able to do, so that folks who are considering like across the district, are like our options, just how they're engaging. So.
No, absolutely. And this is very much needed because as I was saying, it supports the, English as a second language instruction, and it also helps with particular career and job training opportunities. So.
Mr. Peralta.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I just want to register that I'm very happy to see this grant from the Department of Education for adult basic education and ESOL, knowing that we have 20,000 immigrant adults on waiting lists right now for English classes. It is a huge demand from the immigrant communities from all over the place, the people that are coming to this country where English is not their native language, rely on these classes that are provided by BPS and other organizations to be able to enter the labor force and obviously to support their kids in the classes. So I'm very pleased to see this grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, Ms. Noor?
Hi. So my question is about if this grant is going to be given to like a specific school, because I'm not really sure about like the adult education stuff, but I was wondering if it was going to be given to like a specific school or like if the grant was going to be divided into multiple schools and like departments and given off that way. Like how are we giving the money to the departments and schools?
Yes, it's a great question. We have a centralized adult ed program that actually runs out of Madison, in between where Madison and O'Brien is. And so this is intended for the adult programming there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. If there are no more questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the grants as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett, Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The grants are approved.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I will now entertain a motion to approve the in-kind donation as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett, Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The in-kind donations are approved.
Thank you. Our last action item this evening is the approval of the Elliott K-8 School Innovation Plan that was presented at the January 21st meeting. Now I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent for any final comments.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair, again. At the January 21st school committee meeting, school leader Tracy Walker Griffith presented the Elliott K-8 Innovation Schools Innovation Plan renewal for the 2026 to 2031 school years. A long time in the future. Tonight, we're asking the committee to vote in favor of that plan. The Elliott School is one of the district's 25 autonomous schools, which also includes pilots and Horace Mann charters. The 2026 to 2031 plan is focused on closing opportunity gaps for English learners, students with disabilities, and students of color. The Elliott enrolls nearly 800 students across 3 campuses and has reached the 90th percentile in school-wide performance, making it the highest performing large K-8 school in Massachusetts this year. Tracy's here to be able to answer any questions, but I would just encourage the committee to vote affirmatively for this plan.
Thank you. I'll now open it up to committee for any questions and comments. Ms. Torres?
Due to my relationship with the Elliott, out of abundance of caution, I want to recuse myself from any vote tonight and in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I just want to say to Ms. Walker Griffin, again, thank you for all of the work that you and your school community have done. And we're certainly looking forward to you to help us as we have other communities that look to growing or merging. We know that you'll be leaving us for other opportunities, but we know that you won't be too far away. to come back to give us the hand. So again, thank you, and thank you to the Elliott community for all you've done. So if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Elliott K-8 School Innovation Plan as presented. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett, Ms. Torres, Ms. Torres,
Recuse myself.
Abstain.
abstain. Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The motion is approved.
Thank you. Congratulations. Okay. Our main report this evening is the superintendent's preliminary fiscal year 2027 budget recommendations. Before I turn it over to Chief Financial Officer David Bloom for the report, I want to invite the superintendent to give introductory remarks. I'd also like to remind everyone to please speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chair. So tonight we will present our preliminary $1.71 billion budget for fiscal year 27 and mark the official start of the annual school budget process. In a few minutes, Chief Financial Officer David Bloom and Deputy Financial Officer Blair Dawkins will give their presentation. I first want to just take a moment to thank Chief Bloom, Deputy Dawkins, Budget Director Serena LaRoque, and the entire team for the hard work and commitment to the development of this budget. This is not easy work, particularly this year, and it just involves a lot of long hours and late nights and a deep understanding of the needs of each of our school communities, our families, and most importantly, our students. So I'm grateful every day for the budget team's expertise and the dedication of my colleagues. Before I hand it over to the team for the presentation, I'd also like to just say a few words about our current fiscal reality and planning for the next fiscal year. At the December 17th school committee meeting, Chief Bloom and Deputy Dawkins presented the district's annual financial update and explained the impact of the $53 million shortfall the district's currently managing for FY26. Our current budget challenges are due to several factors, as we shared, including just significant cost increases related to historically high health care premiums and their increases, inflation impacting out-of-district special education costs, yellow bus transportation, and student food service. We've been monitoring this since the early fall, as I've shared with the committee, and we're taking decisive and strategic action to address the shortfall so that we're in the best position possible to meet the challenges of FY27 and ensure stability moving forward. Beginning in November, we took the decisive step to pause spending of the central office vacant positions, contracts, and stipends. As we explained, this pause was recently expanded to schools and includes school-based vacancies and discretionary funds. We also extended the spending pause to include more categories of spending across the central office and elective spending at schools. This would be things like supply purchases for the following year, professional development for managerial staff, conference attendance, office supplies, and stipends to increase administrative capacity. Positions that are serving students, such as teachers, paras, social workers, nurses, end-of-year celebrations, graduation activities, any kind of school classroom supplies, they are not part of the spending pause, and they will continue as normal. We will continue to update the committee as the new budget and the expenditure information comes in. In terms of FY27, first, just thanks to unwavering support from our mayor, the BPS budget is expected to increase by 4.5%, which is about $74 million over last year. We are deeply grateful to Mayor Wu for just continued historic funding of the BPS and the city's unprecedented investment in our students under her leadership. Even with this investment, we're confronting similar pressures that we face in FY26 in planning for FY27. The reality is that our costs are increasing at a faster rate than our revenues. In particular, there's 4 major areas that are seeing a projected $86 million budget increase for FY27. Some of this overlaps with areas of that we've also addressed in FY26. They are things like health insurance premium costs, which is a national and statewide issue facing all sectors, transportation, particularly the demand for door-to-door services and improved on-time percentage, special education, which includes out-of-district tuition rates, growth of post-pandemic related services, itinerant services, which is a challenge faced by all large urban districts like ours, and collective bargaining agreements as they roll into the next year and take effect. Even with these pressures, we remain committed to the goals we have set as a district under the guidance of our school committee priorities. Our district priorities have not wavered. The continued implementation of inclusive education as it rolls up, support for bilingual programming, investment in instructional resources like high-quality instructional materials and equitable literacy, and the strengthening of student supports, including early college pathways and career opportunities at the secondary level. What has not changed and will not change is where the vast majority of our funding goes. 93% of our spending in schools and central goes directly to support services for our students and families. To meet our budget obligations, we must protect school-level funding and present to the committee with a balanced budget. We've identified $32 million in central office efficiencies designed to minimize the impact on schools while maintaining all of our long-term goals. Our schools budget, which you will hear a great deal more about at the budget hearing next week on Thursday, and then central in the following hearing, this reflects the cost increases that I outlined. In addition, we are looking at an anticipated enrollment decline of approximately 3,000 students from school year 24-25 and this current school year, which has a greater impact on some of our schools than others. And this is a statewide trend, as you've probably seen reported on lately, where historic increases in enrollment have now gone back down again, very much in line with some of our multilingual learner and immigrant students. As we'll explain further tonight, we developed our FY27 budget using a new spending formula called Reimagining School Funding, which was developed through an 18-month process, and that began in 2022, shortly as I was coming in. There was a great deal of stakeholders that were involved in that, everything from BSAC to SPEDPAC to DLAC to CPC, our citywide parent council. So there really just was broad representation in that process. This is the first year of implementation of that reimagining funding, which will continue to be phased in over the next 2 to 3 years. Chief Bloom will certainly provide more detail on the mechanics of the formula in the presentation, but it's important to note that the former funding formula, which we called weighted student formula, benefited schools that were fully enrolled. If a school wasn't fully enrolled, as was happening as enrollment came down, they needed to use flexible funds meant for other uses, like social workers, enrichment activities, to cover the costs necessary just to run the school building. And as such, teachers and paraprofessionals needed to ensure that they were in compliance. This practice disproportionately impacted schools with high-need student populations. This inequity was apparent with the enrollment declines we faced before the pandemic, and it just increased as those enrollment decreases continued. During the pandemic, we implemented additional funding for schools with enrollment declines to try to minimize budget impacts during the disruptions we were facing. These hold harmless, or what we call soft landings, funds have persisted for several years, and they've really led to a distribution of resources that's not consistent with our funding policies and rules, meaning some schools have gotten and some schools have not gotten them. The Reimagining School funding guarantees that schools receive what they need to meet their instructional needs based on the enrollment and still have the flexibility to spend additional funds to the benefit of their school community. This replaces weighted student funding, and it replaces our hold harmless and soft landings. We realized it was necessary to make this shift and to develop a clear, consistent, and equitable funding formula that the public could understand. When factoring in enrollment decline in our new formula, our budget proposals for schools is $48 million lower, keeping the same services that we have now. Half of these cost savings, about $23 million, have been realized through our long-term facilities planning and decisions. This includes things like the closure of the Dever, Excel, and Lion High in the past cycle, as well as the reconfiguration of Community Academy for the fall of 2026. It also includes the elimination from this year's cycle of entry grades for the closure of Lee Academy, another course to college, and Community Academy of Science and Health, as well as the reconfiguration of the Henderson. The remaining $25 million will come from closing classrooms and programs that are not needed due to enrollment decline and our move away from soft landing funding that we were providing post-pandemic. I want to be as clear as possible that when we experience enrollment declines and there are fewer students to educate, we also need to make reductions in teachers and staff positions because the students aren't there. While those teachers and staff may no longer be employed at their current schools, our Human Resource Department will work with affected staff to identify other opportunities within the district. And our goal is always to support our employees and retain as many of our talented staff as possible. I also just want to be transparent with the committee and the public throughout this process because it is a complex process of budget. As I've been saying since last year, we're facing challenging times, and this budget represents those times. We'll need to make hard decisions and reductions in spending that does not directly support students. I'm asking the entire BPS village to work together on behalf of our students and families, and I've been extremely impressed with how that's been happening at our schools. We want the members of the committee to have the opportunity to fully engage with this information before the vote on the revised budget on March 25th. Just as a reminder, we'll hold 3 budget hearings, Thursday, February 12th, which will be focused on school budgets, Wednesday, March 4th, which will be focused on central budgets, and then a hearing to review our updated budget proposal based on feedback from this body and the community on Wednesday, March 18th, before we ask for your vote on the revised proposal on Wednesday, March 25th. At that time, the process allows for the budget to then be sent to the Boston City Council for their review and appropriation. So at this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Chief Bloom for the presentation and then look forward to your questions and comments at the end.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, Chair Robinson, Vice Chair Scarrett, and members of the school committee, as well as members of the public tuning in tonight. It is my honor to be here before you to present the district's proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2026-27. The work I'll be presenting tonight reflects the combined efforts of a dedicated team of financial analysts led by Budget Director Serena LaRock and Assistant Director Chris Williams, as well as dozens of central office staff across multiple disciplines, more than 100 school leaders, and many hundreds of community members on school site councils and governing boards. I would like to take this opportunity to thank them all publicly for their work in developing this budget. Over the course of my presentation, I will review our FY27 budget proposal, walk through the specific challenges we are facing as a district and the opportunities we have for continued investment, as well as introducing our new reimagined school funding formula and talking a bit about the impact on school budgets. But first, I want to take a moment to outline our budget process with the committee. We're here. This is our first hearing of 5 opportunities to engage with our budget in formal school committee sessions. Next week, on Thursday the 12th, we'll be diving deeper into school budgets. The first week in March, we will do the same for central office budgets. After receiving feedback from these first 3 meetings, we will share a revised budget proposal and come back to this body for a final budget hearing to answer any remaining questions on March 18th. Finally, the school committee will vote on March 25th. These hearings are the main public part of our budget process, but a lot of work goes into getting to this point. We start our budget development with internal projections and reviews in the fall. Schools get their budget information in early December and meet with their school communities through December and January to make a plan for their budgets. Each school then comes and meets with a cross-functional team of central office staff to review their budget information and confirm their plan meets the needs of the students they're projected to serve. After the school committee votes on our budget, it proceeds to be reviewed by the city council as a part of the mayor's proposed budget for the city as a whole. Now I'll move into some details of our FY27 budget proposal. The FY27 budget builds on years of investment by Mayor Wu and the broader community of Boston and BPS. In this chart on the right, you can see the cumulative impact of that investment. Each year's new investment in dark blue builds on the light blue, which is the sum of investments that have come before. Our proposed FY27 operating budget for general fund is $1.71 billion, a $74 million increase on our current budget. This budget continues alignment to our school committee priorities of accelerating academic performance, ensuring access for all students, and providing consistent, high-quality learning opportunities. As I mentioned before, we're presenting a new reimagined school funding formula to ensure our students have access to equitable resources in alignment with the Opportunity and Achievement Gap policy. This formula allows us to maintain and expand investments in our priority areas, such as inclusive education, bilingual programming, instructional resources, and college and career readiness programming. We are doing all of this while managing significant financial pressures stemming from inflation and historically high healthcare costs. I'll now take a moment to discuss those pressures and the impact of this increased funding on our budget as a whole. As the superintendent mentioned earlier, we're going into FY27 facing significant financial pressures. Costs in 4 of our largest cost areas are growing significantly faster than inflation. The increased costs in these 4 areas, which I'll discuss in more detail, are in addition to our typical inflationary costs, and by themselves would cost more than all of our new revenues. As we discussed in our December meeting with the school committee, health insurance costs are rising significantly. In our current school budget, we have $18 million in projected health insurance spending above our budgeted amount. Based primarily on this increase is based primarily on a larger than expected increase in insurance rates, though a decrease in vacancy rates also led to more full-time equivalent staff utilizing health benefits. Next year's budget requires us to fund that $18 million gap, as well as additional funding to account for another significant projected premium increase. We are expecting lower FTEs in full-time equivalent staff in FY27. This will all help offset some of the cost increases, and I'll return to this later in the presentation. In transportation, we are seeing similar current year cost overruns that we need to project forward with the addition of the expected cost of inflation for FY27. This proposal of an $11 million increase actually reflects significant work by our team to identify savings from our FY26 rate of spending, despite being an increase in budget. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in our central hearing. Special education is another similar story. We are seeing continued growth in required services on IEPs, as the superintendent mentioned earlier, as well as inflation in the cost of our out-of-district special education costs. We are working diligently to find efficiencies here as we continue to ensure we are providing all required services. Finally, we have the good fortune of having signed collective bargaining agreements in effect for our largest unions that reflect cost increases for FY27. These increases are in line with inflation, but are still significant given the size of our workforce. In addition to these major cost drivers, there are three factors that make this budget season a bit more complicated. First, we are dealing with significant enrollment decline. Last year, we built a budget together with this body that reflected a projected enrollment of over 49,000 students. This year's budget reflects 3,000 fewer students projected for next year. As we discussed in December, this is not due to students leaving BPS, but instead a decrease in new students enrolling in our district and our structural enrollment decline due to a declining birth rate in our city, similar to other large urban districts nationwide. Second, we are rolling out our new funding formula. This creates another variable of change for our school communities on top of the impact of the enrollment reduction. Finally, we're continuing our long-term plans and priorities by investing in inclusive education, dual language programming, and more. Our budget is managed by a combination of over 100 school budgets and over 40 central department budgets. It is important to note that much of the central budgets are actually paying for school or student services. For example, all of our related service providers for students with disabilities are budgeted centrally, but are providing direct support to students in schools. Similarly, our custodians, facilities repairs, and health insurance are also budgeted centrally, not in our schools. One quirk of this, for example, in tonight's school committee tables, which I'll go over later, you'll see a significant increase in our business services office budget and finance. This is not due to an increase in staffing or non-personnel in our business services office, but that office is where we budget all employee benefits for the entire district. And the increases you see there are simply the increased costs of benefits. When we separate out the true central office costs versus those that are providing support to the schools, central spending schools-based spending makes up 93% of our total. True central office costs are proposed to go down for next year by about $5 million, or 5%, excluding the increased cost of employee benefits. And school budgets are projected to go down about $9 million, or 1%, with the same exclusion. Benefits costs are projected to increase 28% across all categories. Excuse me, I should have said benefits budgets are projected to increase 28% across all categories, which reflects both the current year increased costs as well as projected future cost increases. School services budgeted centrally are also expected to increase by approximately 8%, primarily due to transportation and special education costs. As part of our review of central office budgets, we looked at the cost of continuing with our current level of service. We then identified $32 million in efficiencies and reductions across our central office budgets, which includes those school services budgeted centrally. These reductions range from reducing vacant positions and spreading the work across remaining staff, which we're doing in our finance office, to utilizing feedback from schools on programs or initiatives that are not having the greatest impact. We will discuss the specific details of these reductions in our hearing on March 4th. In my last slide, I mentioned the cost of level service. As I shift to school budgets, I want to explain level service in more detail. Last year for schools, we budgeted together $861 million in costs for over 49,000 students. If we were to budget for the same number of students again, and the same level of need, the cost would rise to $901 million. With a lower projected enrollment for school year 27, we're proposing a total school budget of $853 million. While this is only a 1% decrease from what the school committee approved last year, because of the impact of level service for increased costs of staff and services, the impact felt on our school budgets is 5 times larger, 5%. Or $48 million. That $48 million of felt impact is split into two main categories. First, between our 3 schools that are closing this fall, removal of entry grades at the 4 schools implemented by the long-term facilities plan vote in December, and some other reconfigurations affiliated, we are saving $23 million. The remaining savings come from reductions in budget as we correct for our projected enrollment and remove our legacy of soft landings and hold harmless funding in our new funding form, which I'll return to in a minute. So now I'd like to talk briefly about that formula. Over the last few years, we have moved away from our old funding formula, weighted student funding, or WSF, as we've been providing significant hold harmless funds to schools as we took time to stabilize the district post-pandemic. As the superintendent mentioned, weighted student funding was based primarily on student enrollment to fund both instructional and non-instructional staffing, with significant financial flexibility given to schools that were full. As enrollment declines became more persistent, the affiliated reductions impacted our highest needs schools and students disproportionately, and our formula had limited safeguards in the model to ensure a sufficient baseline of funding. While our students have not fully recovered from the impact of the pandemic, it is important that we move back to using a clear and transparent formula to allocate resources to schools so that we can ensure those resources needed for continued recovery are distributed equitably across the district. So how do we do this? What is this new formula? About 3 years ago, 3.5 now, BPS Finance engaged Afton Partners to lead an 18-month process based in the racial equity planning tool designed to build student, family, and community and school leader voices to the center of a funding redesign process for a new formula. This work was led by a steering committee of 12 BPS community members engaged as critical stakeholders, coming from the Boston Student Advisory Council, Special Education Parent Advisory Council, District English Learner Advisory Committee, Citywide Parent Council, and the school committee's ELL task force. The steering committee was supported by a principal working group of 12 principals, a funding policy working group of central office staff, and an engagement and communications group. The result of this process was a formula that looks at 2 types of spending differently. First, for things that we would consider compliance needs, such as classroom teachers, ESL staff, nurses, social workers, we fund schools at a level of student need, we determine each school's level of student need in the formula and fully fund the appropriate staff. The second type of school spending is flexible. This funding is provided on a per pupil basis, similar to weighted student funding. Except unlike weighted student funding, this is all guaranteed to be above compliance because compliance is funded first. This ensures that each school has resources that they can use to make decisions about the needs of their school with feedback from their broader school community. Later tonight, I'll walk through the public documents that are available to show every school's individual funding level based on these rules, and we will review the rules in more detail in our school's hearing next week. Now that we've talked a little bit about the formula itself, I want to walk you through some key differences between our new formula and weighted student funding. To start with, under WSF, schools needed to be 87.5% full to be able to fund their instructional staff, such as teachers and paraprofessionals. This would force under-enrolled schools to use funding intended for support for high-need students to fund those basics. In the new reimagined school funding formula, funding for that instructional staff is fully funded based on projected enrollment and class size rules from the beginning. And the flexible funding is not required to be used for those services. In weighted student funding, schools that were full would receive more flexible dollars than schools that were higher need and higher funded but under-enrolled. Now, since instructional staffing is fully funded first, flexible funding per pupil is more fully based on student need, which we believe will help improve student outcomes. Finally, under weighted student funding, we had a growing group of schools that did not receive sufficient funding through the formula to meet their compliance needs at all. They would need something we call the sustainability allocation to get to minimum compliance. In our new formula, compliance is funded first, so there is never a need for an additional allocation to get to the minimum, and every school is guaranteed flexible funding. The new system also removes the legacy of soft landings and hold harmless that were rolled over year to year, regardless of changes of need, that led to inequities between schools with similar levels of need but different funding. We will be making funding available for a small group of schools to transition from their current budgets to their new reimagined school funding budgets if they are going through a significant change between those two budgets. And once again, we'll talk through all of this in more detail next week. Okay, so we've talked about the new formula in theory. I want to take some time to talk about the implications in practice. With our enrollment reduction and change to our funding formula, schools are in one of 5 common situations. Scenarios A, D, and E are most straightforward to understand. In these situations, the school budget and enrollment are changing roughly proportionally. Schools are then either adding, reducing, or keeping staff the same to meet the needs of their updated student populations. But those changes are happening basically in proportion to the change in enrollment and need. Scenarios B and D are a bit more complex. The schools in scenario B are having a budget that's going down, while the expectation is their enrollment for next year will be similar. Each school in this group has a slightly different reason for being in this situation. But the most common example is that there's a history of enrollment decline or decline in need in that school over the last 6 years, as we've been doing hold harmless. And so they are going into next year's budget, or they came into this year's budget, I should say, with a significant level of hold harmless funding. While their enrollment is now projected to stay flat, that they are still funded at that higher level due to the history of hold harmless. There are also a few schools that had special agreements in prior years, either to run their programs in a certain way or to pilot initiatives. As we roll out this formula, schools are being asked to align their budgets with the new rules, and we end many of these special agreements. The schools in scenario D are being impacted in a positive way by the new formula. Their enrollment is not increasing, and yet their funding is. These were schools that were typically having to fund compliance requirements using their discretionary or flexible funding, which limited their ability to add those resources that we think could be most impactful on growing outcomes in their community. This new formula allows those schools additional funding to be able to access new flexible resources. For school year 27, we are limiting the amount of new funding for schools in scenario D, pushing some of them into group E with no changes, as we try and focus our resources on supporting our schools with larger enrollment and budget reductions and limit the amount of FTE growth in the system, given our rise in costs. For schools with declining enrollment, reductions could be significant. Therefore, some of these schools are needing transition support to get from their current enrollment to their future. Some of this transition support is to ensure that as a system, we have sufficient capacity so that students impacted by school closures have the opportunity to make choices and attend their schools of choice. Similar to, these schools that are impacted will be given 2 years to transition with a specific plan, but only if they have a specific circumstance that requires temporary funding. They are not being held harmless. For schools in scenario D, as I mentioned, we've held back additional funding for what is needed. When I go over the documents later tonight, you'll see a negative number for these schools, where that is sort of the reduction in transition funding. Over 2 years, This negative number, this sort of decrease in their funding level of new funding, will be slowly removed, and the schools will have access to these additional resources. But with our current financial situation, we have to prioritize support for schools going through more significant changes and reductions in their budget. Overall for schools, as I mentioned before, we are seeing a reduction in full-time equivalent staff, or FTEs. This reduction is largely proportionate to our decline in enrollment, as this chart demonstrates. The light blue bar in this chart represents our staffing levels before the pandemic. The dark blue bar represents our staffing levels for the current year based on the enrollment projections we used for the budget last winter. And the orange bar is our proposal for next year. Each bar shows the number of staff we're hiring or projected to hire per 500 students. This is a stand-in for our goal for an average school size. What you can see in this data is that since before the pandemic, we have increased the ratio of staff in the district per student, with increases in teachers, support staff, and paraprofessionals specifically called out here. A significant portion of this increase is due to the fact that the percentage of students needing smaller group sizes, such as students with disabilities and multilingual learners, has increased over the last 6 years. Moving into FY27, as you compare the dark blue bar to the orange bar, you can see we are reducing staff, but we are maintaining a similar ratio of staff to students, ensuring that we're not losing ground on the progress we've made in building out strong programming in our schools. Finally, before we close out for tonight, I want to return to what's coming next and the materials we've shared. Next week, we'll be back to talk about school budgets in more detail and follow up on questions we received from the committee tonight. The first week of March, we're doing the same for central office budgets. And then in mid-March, we'll be submitting our revised budget proposal before coming back to the school committee for a vote on March 25th. Please also note there's a link to our website to get more information and QR code. Sorry, I forgot that word. Linked on the presentation to be able to provide feedback directly. I'm now going to close out of the presentation briefly and go on to our website to show you how to access the materials. If you go to bostonpublicschools.org/budget, you're directed to this budget office website. You can click on the link that says FY 2027 Budget Development on the left-hand menu. This will bring you to this landing page, which will show all of our public meetings as they occur. For now, since this is our first meeting, those are the materials available. On this page, we have all of our public information that's been shared with the committee and you all, translated into all of our major languages. If some materials are not yet available in all languages, they will be provided shortly. Section 1 shows our main narrative updates to the committee and the public. This includes my budget memo to the school committee introducing the budget, our equity impact statement, the racial equity planning tool we used for Reimagine School funding. Section 2 is a copy of our budget presentation, which I presented tonight. Section 3 is the school committee tables I mentioned earlier. For those of you who want it as a PDF, that's what this main link is. For those of you who are data nerds like me and want to see it in Excel, there's a link to the Excel version. These tables contain a lot of information, but just to briefly orient you to them, we have 3 main types of information: account, program, and department level budgets. You can think about account as what are we buying? Is it staff? Is it non-personnel, equipment, supplies? Program is just that. What is the area of spending or type of program? So special education spending, bilingual education spending, and so on. Department is where does that spending occur? Is it in a school budget, in a central office budget, and so on. Finally, you'll notice that each section is split into 3 subcategories. General fund is what we're primarily reviewing with the school committee now, which is our operating funding from the city. External funds shows an estimate of external grant revenue that we will come back to this body with for specific approval level later in the process when we receive that funding. And all funds is a combination of those 2 things. To go briefly into one tab here, each tab shows our budget at the beginning of the year, our budget currently, and the proposal we're making for next year. It also shows the number of positions we're planning for and our budget in dollars. The next section of materials is information about Reimagine School funding. This includes a table of our total allocations to schools, similar copies for PDF and those of us who love Excel files. This table shows you every single school, every single rule, and how much was allocated. This can be a lot of information to look at, but I recommend it if you in particular want to look across one rule and understand what a variety of schools received. The second document in this section is a list of funding rules with descriptions. We'll go over this more deeply in next week's meeting. And finally, there's a link to a folder with each individual school's allocation details. These documents show you for each school what changed about that school's budget, or sorry, what went into that school's budget, what was the output of the rule. It gives you a little bit of information on the data that went into the decision, and you can use these sheets in combination with the rules file to understand more about where each school's allocation came from. The last document is our grant projections. These tie to the external funds that I mentioned in our budget tables. These are our estimates for grants we think we are likely to receive next year. These grants will come before the committee for specific approval when we are actually awarded. We will continue to post materials to this website as we go through our budget process, and we will do updated versions of all of these materials before the school committee votes in March. And with that, I would love to turn it back over to Chair Robinson and the committee for any questions you may have.
I want to thank you, Mr. Bloom, for that incredibly hard work. And thank you for all of the additional data and different forms that you're providing for us. I know that a lot of this has been in response to the committee's request over the past years about getting more specific data, as well as having that available earlier and available to our public as well. So thank you so much to you and your team for being able to do that. I'll start with Ms. Polanco Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Let me see, go to the English channel. Thank you for the presentation. Hay mucha información y sé que vamos a tener muchas preguntas y este es el principio de muchas conversaciones que vamos a tener. Yo creo que pensando en la fórmula de financiación, desde mi criterio, yo creo que está bien, hace sentido el pensar en asignar fondos por salones de clases.
So I'd have to say that there's a lot of information. It's a beginning of the process. There will be probably more questions in the future, a lot of information as well. Looking at the new formula, I do believe, I personally believe that it makes sense from the allocation point of view. Adelante, Rob.
A poner el dinero de acuerdo a los salones de clase.
So the ability to be able to allocate the money or the funds depending on the on different classes.
Me preocupa un poco, me preocupa que como va a ser por salones de clase, yo pensando en los maestros y en la cantidad de estudiantes que estos maestros van a tener, sabiendo nosotros que el distrito necesita más personal y que ahora, como estamos viendo el presupuesto, va a haber, se denota que va a haber recorte de personal.
So it is my understanding that there will be some cats that will be part of the budget as well. Looking at the classrooms and the amount of money allocated into different classrooms, it is concerning considering the future cats and the need that there will be for staff that is going to be allocated to each particular class if those funds are going to be allocated per class.
Entonces, pensando en la reimaginación que escuché, ¿qué ha pensado que es el plan del distrito? Por ejemplo, ¿cuántos estudiantes por salón de clases están pensando en colocar?
Mhm.
¿Cuántos estudiantes por salón?
So
Es mi
thinking about
primera pregunta.
my first question is thinking about the metrics, the ratios themselves, thinking about the reimagining funding category as well. My question is, what is the district planning in particular? What would be the allocation, the amount of students per classroom to be able to maximize the funding available? That is my first question.
Thank you so much for your continued feedback as well as kicking us off with the first question of the season. We primarily are basing the formula on the ratios outlined in our contractual agreement with the teachers union. So those class sizes range from 15 at their smallest in K0, K1 inclusion classes.
Excuse me, David. Excuse me, Mr. Brown. Nobody interpretation in Spanish for the Spanish channel right now. So just yeah.
We're not sure exactly. The other interpreter should be interpreting simultaneously right now. Mr. Blum, just 1 second.
Of course.
Cynthia, ¿estás ahí? ¿Estás interpretando? Más que the other interpreter, she's interpreting simultaneously.
Repeat again, please, Mr. Bloom, the first sentence, please. Thank you so much.
¿Ya está escuchando, Rafa, el otro intérprete?
Sí.
Okay.
Sí.
Okay.
Interpretation is all said, Mr. Bloom. You don't mind repeating again?
Well, I'm glad I get the opportunity to repeat because I actually got something very slightly wrong. So I have the opportunity to correct myself from the beginning. So our class sizes do largely follow both sort of state regulations as well as our contractual agreement with the Boston Teachers Union. Those class sizes range from as small as 8 in substantially separate classrooms to 15 in K0, K1 inclusion classrooms, and then starting at 20 in kindergarten and growing up to 28 or 31 by the time we get to high school. The way our model works in elementary schools is the schools are funded to hire the staff to build capacity up to the class size maximum. So if you have 14 students in a class or 18 students in a class, you're still receiving the full funding for that classroom teacher and any required paraprofessionals.
Thank you. He conocido de muchas paraprofesionales que han empezado su carrera en el distrito educativo ahora, justamente después de hacer esfuerzos y pasar el examen de paraprofesional.
I'm aware of as well that there are many paraprofessionals that started their careers with the district. They had to be able to pass this test that was required from them.
Y créanme, han hecho grandes esfuerzos que han descubierto su pasión y quieren continuar estudiando para en el futuro ser unas maestras y maestros.
And believe me, they're doing significant efforts to be able to continue with their careers and to be able to become teachers as well, these paraprofessionals.
Y en este mismo way están estos nuevos maestros que han empezado en diferentes escuelas que son buenísimos.
At the same time, we have new teachers that have started at different schools, and I do have to say they are great teachers as well.
Y con la proyección que están haciendo, hay una alarma de preocupación sobre qué pasaría con ellos el próximo año escolar, hay cierto nerviosismo, inseguridad, si continuaré conservando mi trabajo y la escuela lo necesita y la escuela ha hecho un empuje de seguimiento. Estos líderes escolares tienen ante ellos unas decisiones difíciles que tomar.
So I'd have to say that at the leadership level, the leaders of each particular school have their very difficult decision making to be made, because there's a lot of nervousness and ambiguity and uncertainty in terms of what is going to happen to all these credentialed professionals in the future that they're starting their careers. And there is that level of uncertainty that is embedded as well. At the same time, there's a significant work on the leadership part to preserve these positions.
I think
Creo que
somewhere
hay otro
maybe
lenguaje de
in
interpretación que está hablando al mismo tiempo que el señor Juan.
Looks like Rafa, she's listening to a different language, not Spanish, for the translation that is being provided. So there seems to be a mix of channels there. She's not hearing the interpretation. That's what I'm trying to figure out, see what happened to the Spanish interpreter. ¿Está escuchando otro idioma, Rafa?
Sí.
She's
I don't know if you everyone listen different, right?
We're hearing it too.
Excuse me, everyone should be outside of the English channel. You should be in the no language channel.
Okay.
And if there and for the interpreters, please make sure you're in the right channel and not in the English channel. Thank you.
Spanish interpreter should be in the Spanish channel.
Okay. I don't know if you need repeat my question about the principal make a difficult decision about the code, the some position, the paraprofessional, new paraprofessional working very hard for pass the test. And now I think he's like more nervous for the new people come to the district. All the time, the district need more support for the paraprofessional bilingual, for the new teacher. And then I think it's very difficult moment for this special population, the paraprofessional and new teacher. What is can you tell me a little bit more? What is the criteria you use for that?
Yes. So I think first we start by looking at the needs of students and the types of positions we're going to reduce. So each school, the situation is a little bit different. And what we start with the type of position that's needed. Then, depending upon the type of position that might be reduced, we go through, our HR team goes through and looks at appropriate licensure, seniority, and other factors to determine which staff members might be sort of at risk of being accessed or non-renewed from that school. I think what our HR team is trying to work on, though, is that every year we have hundreds of positions that open naturally anyway. And in a typical year, we hire lots of new folks externally who do really great work in our schools, as you were mentioning, Member Blanco Garcia. I think this year our focus is going to be on finding great spots inside our district for these excellent educators who are ready to continue to provide service. So even if they don't end up staying in their original school community, we are hopeful that we can work across school communities, especially within the same region, to find them another home in BPS to be able to provide that excellent support.
Thank you. My last question is about when you talk to que los principales de las escuelas van a tener que enfrenten reducciones. Sé que en la presentación habló usted de que los principales de las escuelas, los líderes escolares que van a enfrentar reducciones, podrán solicitar financiamiento temporal.
I do believe that you mentioned at some point of a presentation, Mr. Bloom, that some of the principals or the leadership that will be confronting temporary reductions, they will have access to temporary funding. Is that what you conveyed before?
¿Cómo
Yes.
van a hacer esto? Sí, me gustaría saber porque pude ver en la presentación que hasta 2 años. Entonces, esto va a paliar un poco tiene que ver un poco con lo que va a ser la reducción, con lo que va a ser la pérdida, la disminución en el presupuesto.
So I do believe that you mentioned a 2-year buffer or in that regard. So does that have to do to the reduction in the budget? How does this 2-year period going to support that when we're talking about a reduction in terms of budget? And just to rephrase what Rafa mentioned before, she was making reference at the same time that we are having new paraprofessionals starting their careers where the district, the leadership is confronting difficult decision making in the future because of the possible reduction of staff at the same time. So there's a level of uncertainty and concern on the one side. On the other side, there is some willingness to continue working with this staff that are credentialed. That's the ambivalence that was presented by Rafa before.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. In terms of the transition support, I'm going to give you a sneak preview of next week's hearing when we'll go through a specific example. But the English high school is a school experiencing significant projected enrollment decline, primarily because they were a school that served large numbers of new migrant and immigrant youth who were new to the country. Their budget reduction was roughly proportional to their enrollment. And I think the school leader and the community understood why it was happening. But when they reviewed their budget, they gave us feedback that there were sort of two things they wanted us to take into consideration. The first was the impact on their Chapter 74 vocational nursing program at the school. And the second was a desire to maintain capacity to serve students coming out of closing schools. Because historically, the English has been a school that is chosen by a lot of students in that situation. We reviewed the data with them, and we determined that they could receive a small transition support of around $250,000 to ensure that we could maintain that capacity in the school and make sure that then sort of students who want to choose the English, right, we have enough open seats at the English to be able to serve students who are making that choice coming out of our schools that are closing. Next year at this time, we'll have better information about what's happening with enrollment at the English. And either their enrollment will have increased because of sort of more students choosing the school and they won't need the transition funding anymore, or they'll be able to reset to a new and lower reality and make the remaining reduction. But this transition support at the English gives us the opportunity to transition them to a lower enrollment level strategically without losing out on opportunity for students at other schools that might want a seat there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Noor?
Hi, Mr. Bloom. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really liked how you gave out the information in a very neat way. But I do have some questions, and they may be a little repetitive because I asked you one of them yesterday too.
Please.
So, my first question is, what are like the main priorities in the FY27 budget for BPS? Like some areas of focus?
Yes. Thank you so much. And I think yesterday you got the rough draft of my answer. Hopefully today I'll give you the more polished.
Yes, please. I'm looking for,
for the public. I think we're really focused on three main priorities. The first is, how do we efficiently and effectively manage our financial situation given the challenges we're facing as a district. The second is, how do we adjust our budget for our change in enrollment while still meeting the needs of the students who are in our district? And the third is, how do we continue making sure we continue to sustain and build on investments we've been making in key priority areas, such as inclusive education, dual language programming, and high school and like early college and career advising, those sorts of priorities that we have as a district. So I'd say those are my top three.
Okay. Moving on, another question that I have is, you talked about enrollment declines. Correct me if I'm wrong, because yeah. So you talked about enrollment declines leads to like giving less funding to a school, which can also lead to like teachers like losing their jobs or something like that. Because if there are not enough students to teach, then there won't be like a lot of teachers necessary, right?
That's correct.
So does this affect like co-teaching? Because I was personally taught Arabic. I took Arabic during the first semester of the school year, and I had two teachers in my class because my class was pretty big. So Mr. Samir and Mr. Zakaria. And I personally really liked their method of co-teaching because it was a big class. And with language classes, the thing is like it just gets a little too much for I think one person to get a hold of the whole class and teach a whole curriculum within like a semester. So are the funds gonna impact like co-teaching methods, or like are teachers not gonna be allowed to co-teach anymore? What's gonna happen to like classrooms that are based off of like co-teachings?
What I would say is the answer is both yes and no, and I'll explain more. Overall, as a system, I actually think we're investing in more co-teaching as a practice. But at some individual schools, there may be less, right, as student need has declined at that school. So as you described, right, you were in a situation where the needs of that student, the large class, the variety of needs, required co-teaching. In those situations, we should not be seeing very many reductions in co-teaching in that sort of situation at all. Where we are seeing some changes is in places where we built co-teaching for an expectation of a certain number of students who required co-teaching services, and maybe we no longer have those students in that school. And those reductions, I think, are very challenging because obviously people are used to a particular model or method of teaching. But when we look at the needs of the students who are in that school, we don't find the same level of co-teaching as required. But that being said, I expect every school at BPS will be doing some amount of co-teaching next year, whether that's during literacy blocks in an elementary school, in a language class, as you mentioned, at a high school, in small groups for special education services, or in many other combinations of ways across the system.
Yeah. And lastly, so we talked about like hiring teachers and stuff that would be like a little less. So how are like bilingual or like ESL teachers or like special education teachers like prioritized in the FY27 budget? Like how are the hiring for them like, prioritized?
Yes. So what I would say is teachers who teach ESL and special education are often our teachers who are in the highest demand. Those teachers who are ready to teach all students of a variety of backgrounds are the folks that, from my conversations with school leaders, we are always trying to prioritize. And then the other thing I would just say is those teachers are the first teachers we make sure we're budgeting, right? So when we're reviewing budgets, we're ensuring that there's appropriate staffing there. Our Office of Multilingual and Multicultural Education reviews every school's enrollment of students who are learning English and determines the required ESL staffing. Our Office of Specialized Services builds what we call a service map with individual schools to understand the needs of every single student with disabilities in that school, how many groups of services are provided, and how many teachers are required for those groups. I will say, though, one of the challenges we're seeing, I mentioned this briefly when we were talking about the English earlier, is especially in our high schools, we're seeing many fewer newcomers, right, in our system as a result of federal policies. So in some of our high schools, there will be fewer ESL teaching positions, right? And so there will be some teachers who are displaced. And that's where our high school leaders and school superintendents are working diligently with HR to try and find those teachers homes in other schools that need staff. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, teachers who are qualified to do that work are always in high demand.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Torres?
Hi, thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for your budget. One question, I'm all about inclusion, and the question that I have is on the page 7 of your presentation, that if you can just clarify for me when you say in number 2, the new funding formula will create more equity and predictability. What exactly does that mean when it comes to the all school being inclusive now?
So I think there is a principle in our new formula that is consistent with a principle we had in our prior formula, which is that schools or students with the same need get the same resources regardless of where they go to school. But schools with different needs get different resources based on the needs of the students they're serving. So in particular, one of our rules, which we'll be discussing more deeply next week, looks at the funding per pupil for students in inclusive education settings and ensures that if a student moves from one school to another, they should expect the same amount of resources to follow them. But if a school has way more of those students, they will also see way more resources overall. And so for schools with fewer students, right, what you might see is teachers who are split across a couple of rooms, who are coming in and out and providing services to students as needed. For schools that have more significant populations of need, you might see more significant amounts of co-teaching to ensure that all the students in that school are getting the resources. So that's mostly what I'm referring to there.
Okay, another question that I have is on page 17, the compliance funding and the other funding that is what the school does. I just wanted to know who checks to see if the fundings are being used for the programs when it comes to inclusion, and how is that, what accountability, who is accountable for checking to see if that funding is being used for what we need or our students need in these classrooms?
Thank you so much for that question, because I always appreciate the opportunity to describe a process I think we have that's fairly robust. So it starts in the planning process, where every school makes a plan for how those resources will be used. That plan is reviewed by the school leader, the school supervisor, and all of the main departments that are responsible for that accountability. So the Office of Specialized Services is accountable in this case for inclusive education. All of the members in that meeting, those meetings just finished in January, sign off on a specific plan in a document that we preserve. So they make a very specific plan for student services. Then, as the year begins, we do two things. The first is our assistant directors in the Office of Specialized Services are reviewing what's actually happening in schools to make sure it's consistent with those plans. The second thing is we are comparing the needs that are actually in the schools in the fall to what we planned for in the winter. And because we're making these plans 9 months in advance, we're never going to get them all right. So we have a process that actually starts just after the first round of student assignment in April that reviews schools' assigned students and identifies places where schools might need additional resources. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit is we keep a reserve for school spending in the finance department, and we allocate it throughout the year to schools based on changes in need they're experiencing versus what we expected.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Dr. Elkins.
Hi. Thank you, Chief Bloom, for this and the preliminary conversations we've had leading up to it. So, I had just a couple of clarification questions, particularly on the table with restricted funding versus also discretionary. Could you just clarify like what discretionary with guardrails is for me?
Yes, and if you don't mind me taking 2 seconds to do this slightly differently for the public, I'm
Right.
just going to point the public to what you're referring to.
Right. The funding rules. Yeah.
So yes, this is the document entitled 4B, the funding rules. And you'll see on the right here, some funding is restricted, some says restricted with some flexibility. And then down at the bottom here, there's discretionary and discretionary with guardrails.
Mhm.
So and a great example here is this, what we call our opportunity index-based partnership funding. So a collection of our highest need schools get funding based on their need to provide programming run by external partners. The idea behind this funding is it is sort of replacing some of the fundraising that sort of higher advantage communities are able to do on their own for these outside partnerships. So schools have discretion over the types of partners they buy. They could do an after-school attendance program. They could do before-school music. They could do arts, all sorts of different things. But there are guardrails or restrictions on what they can do with the funding. So they couldn't use that money to hire additional administration in their building, for example. So while there is choice, it is somewhat limited. Similarly, for homeless supports, right? They have flexibility over the types of homeless supports they provide, but that funding needs to be used with the purpose of providing supports to homeless youth. So that's the guardrail in that case.
Okay. No, that's helpful. And so I guess it seems to me that in addition to this reimagined school funding formula, it would be, I'm thinking about it perhaps from a parental perspective of how do I become more involved in the knowledge of what my child's school is spending money on. And so obviously my head goes to school site councils, things like that. And so I'm thinking about in our highest need schools, how are we encouraging and how are we building those types of school site councils out so that as we are engaging in this reimagined school like formula, school funding formula, that our families are walking alongside like us in this this journey too.
So I can speak in my role as a BPS parent. I know I've been encouraged by our school's family liaison to attend some, these sorts of meetings to be able to learn more about the budget. And so I think that is one of the most important roles of a family liaison is encouraging parent involvement in things like school site councils, family councils, and the like. I also think what we've been trying to do is work with our school leaders to give them sample materials to share with their school communities to help them understand the budget. So literally what we do is we go to schools that have really great parent engagement and we say, we're going to shamelessly steal your materials that you use and give it to your colleagues to sort of duplicate and replicate so they're not going from scratch. So that's definitely what we're working on. I think we also know that we need to provide differentiated support to some of our communities that need a little bit more help. And that's where our Office of Family and Community Advancement steps in to provide additional support to those communities that are maybe struggling with attendance at school site council or struggling to get their school site council running, right? We have that sort of additional central office support for that process.
Right. And I imagine probably even connecting that to like the development of like quality school plans would probably be where they might articulate or individual schools might articulate that.
Yes. I mean, our hope is that, you're in the fall, you're doing the quality school plan process. And basically, as soon as you're done with that, you as a school site council are getting to review and actually vote on some of the discretionary funding in your school. And so my hope would be in school communities, right? And this is what we're working with school leaders to do, that they are showing their communities the connection between, okay, in our quality school plan, here are the things we said. Therefore, here are the partners we're proposing to bring in, and here's how they're aligned to our goals in our quality school plan, for example, right? And I think every school is in a community is in a different place with that work. Some have that routine really down pat. Others are still building up that muscle.
Right. That makes sense. And just from a separate question from a tracking, like I imagine like we'll be looking at this over the course of years just to look at like weighted school funding or just school level budgets, right? Year over year to see sort of the comparison between reimagined school funding as compared to like weighted student funding just to see where sort of the losses are, particularly for schools. And actually, do we have a projection of under this new formula how many schools will either experience a decline in their school budget? Or
We do have some estimates.
okay,
What I would say is it's hard to separate the impact of the formula from the impact of the enrollment decline. Some schools it's a little bit more obvious. So there's a school, I haven't given them a heads up that I mentioned their name tonight, so I'm not going to say their name, but there's a school that's closing 5 classrooms, right? Because there's not enough students enrolled for those classrooms. And while that's hard for the community, they understand what's going on there. If you add up the cost of those staff from those classrooms that are closing, that's their entire budget cut. So actually, all the other things, librarians, social workers, specialty courses, for the students that remain, that experience is actually going to be very similar. There might be some personnel changes, but the overall student experience should be similar. That's not really there's only a certain extent to which that's an impact of the formula. That's more just about enrollment versus some other schools where there is sort of maybe they're losing some of their hold harmless funding, and that really is directly related to the implementation of our formula. Next week, we'll be talking through 3 examples in a little bit more detail that show sort of each of the different scenarios that we've discussed tonight.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta?
Thank you so much, Chair Robinson. Thank you, David, for your presentation. I have to say that until tonight, I thought that my household budget was complex. Being this my first BPS budget, I conclude that ours is not that complicated. I have a couple questions, but first I want us to bring back one particular data point in your presentation, which is even with the reductions, we are gonna see a ratio of one student per one teacher per 10 student. That's very important in comparison with pre-pandemic when it was one teacher for every 12 students. I think we need we need to keep explaining that to the community, that it's not that our students are gonna have to share their teachers with so many other students because we are making these cuts. In terms of questions, I have three quick questions. The first one is, I noticed that in your presentation you didn't um, say expressively how many positions the budget is expecting to cut, and I would like you to comment, because it has been said between 300, 400. If you can say more about that.
Yes. So I feel a little bit like I've planted these questions because thank you so much. You've given me an opportunity to share a different one of our public documents with the broader community to show where we can find these sorts of numbers. So these are our tables that I mentioned earlier. And I'm in the account.gf or general fund tab. And at the bottom here, you'll see the grand total for the number of full-time equivalent positions that are being reduced. So overall as a system, we're reducing about 530 positions. A number of these positions are vacant or staff will move to other jobs in the district. So our estimate is 300 to 400 fewer staff. But in terms of the number of positions we're reducing, it's 531.
Thank you. And another question is, I'm interested in know what outcomes are we expecting to start seeing as a result of the new funding formula? Basically, when we are concluding school year 26-27, what will be different and better, I hope, than now?
Yeah, I think for me, there are two levels to this question. The first is like what I would call the direct impact. And for me, what that is the addition of flexible resources to our highest need schools, right? Because it is my belief, and I believe that belief is shared by a number of leaders in this district and members of this board, that many of those flexible resources are the most impactful resources for a school. I know for me, my favorite place growing up was my school library. As great as my classroom teachers were, and I'm sure I got a lot of learning there, my point of engagement in school was the school library. And so by ensuring we're prioritizing those flexible resources at our highest need schools, we're enabling those communities to design an experience that really gives their community what they need. So that's the first thing for me. That's going to be the most direct outcome I'm hoping we can see. And I'm hoping as you visit schools, you can hear a little bit of schools going through that and experiencing that change. I think then there's the sort of secondary impacts, which ultimately are student outcomes, right? Increased performance on, the MCAS and, reduced dropout rates, increased attendance. I think that's where, the budget by itself doesn't make the change, right? That's really the work we're doing cross-functionally in a variety of ways with the opportunity achievement gap policy and our strategic objectives with quality school plans in schools to really make sure we're making the best use of resources. And for finance, what that means is we're trying to plug into the regional model that we've built as a district to make sure that people understand what resources are out there and that schools are really making the most of what's available.
Thank you. And my last question is, you mentioned several times tonight how school administrator and the principals and their teams in the formula we've been using until now, they have to take from here to fund compliance positions and things like that. this new formula hopefully will put them on a better position that they don't have to worry about that. On the other hand, I want to know what level of flexibility will they retain? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones that know what's going on that school and what's needed for that school. So I see that some positions are mandated to them, obviously, to fund, but also how are they going to keep some flexibility in order to have the budget that they do need in their schools?
Unfortunately, I'm going to turn a bunch of that question back on you, which I think this is one of the hardest questions for us to grapple with as a broader school community and a school board, right? A school committee is how do we balance that school level flexibility with universal expectations, right? So we have said every school needs to have a family liaison. Every school needs to have at least one social worker, right? There are certain things that as a community we believe are universal expectations. But the more money we spend on those universal expectations, the less we have left for flexibility. And so one of our most constant conversations with school leaders especially is, hey, I think it's really important that we have X position in our schools. And then we say, okay, like let's then talk as a broader group of school leaders about do we all believe we should be mandating that position? Or is that something that schools should have the ability to determine? And so I think as we engage with this new formula as a public body over the next few years, I think this is going to be a question that continues to come up. Because for me, a part of the long-term facilities planning work is about having schools that have sufficient size to have the resources to be able to invest in new positions. And so then our question is, how much choice do we give them over those new positions versus how much do we mandate as an expectation for all of our families? So I think I'm probably going to be bringing that question back to you over the next several years.
Thank you.
Mr. Tran?
Thank you for allowing me to ask a few questions here. First of all, thank you for your presentation like everybody else. I reviewed the entire budget for the last few days, and there are things that I like, and then there are things that I really don't understand or don't see the statistics that would or the probability that would occur given the scenario. The first thing that I particularly like under the reimagined school funding is the safety net that this new funding formula will provide to schools subsequent to the whole harmless or the soft landing, that the school or the district may be able to grant 2-year transition plans. I think I hope it's 5 years, but 2 years I think it's good. Now the budget scenario on page 20, you listed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different scenarios. Scenario A, scenario B, C, D, and E. And underneath that, the statement states that school in scenario A and B are where the village is needed most. I agree to that as well. But given the fact that the new budget formula is hinged on the first criterion is the mandatory funding which is legally mandatory. I understand. I agree to that. But the second part is the discretionary funding. And if scenario C, D, E does appear, does that if those scenarios somehow occur, are they the product of the discretionary funding that are misappropriated or over-appropriated or what? I try to understand those three scenarios.
Yeah.
But I fail to see it.
I'd be very happy to answer that question. So scenario E is largely just that their budget is unchanged, right? Their budget's more or less the same. Scenario D is increase that's proportional to enrollment. So there's a school that comes to mind. They're adding a new substantially separate classroom. So they have new funding, new staff, and more students. Scenario C is the hardest one to explain, right? Because effectively what this is a reflection of schools that have historically been underfunded according to our new criteria. So next week, we're going to talk about the Tobin School and how they are in scenario C, right? Their enrollment is actually declining, but their funding level is increasing. And that is because when we look at the history of the budgets at the Tobin, they've been having to take money from resources that would be allocated for those flexible or discretionary or supplemental supports, and use them to fund instruction where there wasn't sufficient weighted student funding. So now that's being corrected. And even though their enrollment is flat or declining, their budget is increasing. And we've said, in that case, to Carla Jenkins, the principal at the Tobin, we're going to have to phase in your new funding over 2 years to help us, support the village in schools in scenarios A and B.
I get it. So Tobin School, as I suspected, correctly suspected, was that the discretionary fund was somehow more than they would ask for, because of aside from the from the mandatory funding, the discretionary funding allocated there were more than sufficient. So that's why they're using them for other things.
Yes.
Which is, I don't know whether it's permissible or not, but I used to run, I used to manage a nonprofit organization. I used to move funds around from different programs to help alleviate other programs, and sometimes for salary for core staff as well. So is that something that happened here?
So in the case of the Tobin and other schools in scenario C, we had been attempting under weighted student funding to give them discretionary resources for high need students. But in reality, because of their under enrollment, they didn't have access to those resources.
I see.
Right. And so it's not actually that the school was making an incorrect decision. It was that they didn't have sufficient resources. So in our new formula, that will be corrected. And even though their enrollment is not necessarily increasing, they will have more funding. And that is what's going to get phased in over time.
Thank you. Clear.
Thank you.
Ms. Garrett?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Bloom, for the presentation and for orienting the public on where to find all these materials and how to navigate them. Many of my questions are also clarifying, just to ensure that we're all on the same page before we go into the next meeting that focuses on school budgets. And my questions are a little all over the place, so pardon the subject changes from question to question. You showed us where we could find that there are 530 positions, which equal 300 to 400 fewer actual staff members in occupied positions projected to be reduced. Can you break that down further based on school-based positions versus central, teachers versus support staff, part-time, full-time? What greater level of detail could we have about that number today?
I would love to provide some greater detail about that number. So I'll return us back to those tables. So this table, I referred earlier to this 531 number at the bottom here. If we look up to this top section, you can see a sort of high-level summary of the reductions by different staff types. So right now, there are 265 fewer teaching positions, 161 fewer paraprofessional positions. I will say part-time positions are the hardest ones to demonstrate here because many of them don't show up as full-time equivalents. And so that can be difficult to sort of demonstrate or talk about. But you can sort of see that here at a high level. As you then scroll down, you can look at another level of detail over the types of positions that are being reduced, right, within sort of one more level of nuance. And this also includes our non-personnel. So if you were looking at positions, you would sort of skip those sections. But here you can see our number of special education teachers is actually growing, despite the decline in teaching staff overall. There are larger declines in general education teachers and bilingual staff, or bilingual teaching positions. A lot of this has to do with what we were discussing earlier about the reduction in sort of newcomers and immigrant youth in our high schools, especially. But once again, you'll see sort of special education teacher here, which is for separate programs, special education resource and inclusion teachers. Those are both increasing. So there is a lot of nuance in this data.
And because the lines are so specified and, appreciate that transparency, what's the overall approximate ratio of school reductions to central office-based reductions?
Okay. Let's go here to our department category section. So what I will say is, so right now, the full-time equivalent breakdown is about 426 in school-based and school budgets and 105 in central office. There is a challenge here in that a significant number of the central office reductions are in part-time staff. So it is a higher number of employees impacted than the number of full-time equivalents. And then you could look inside individual departments, each sort of department budget. You can see what's changing. And then once again, also then in each school. Right?
Thank you. So with approximately 105 individuals in central office, what is the proportional percentage of that reduction, or what's the approximate number of employees in central office right now?
So it's central budgets. It's about a 4% reduction in FTE for central budgets versus about 5% in schools. You can see the total number of employees here. And then you can see that breakdown in different types of offices. So here's our operations team, which is 1,400 staff. If we go down to operations here, we'll see the biggest subset of that staff is our facilities team, which has all of our custodians, and our transportation team, which has all of our bus monitors. These are our biggest categories, right, in operations, and we are seeing some reductions there. You'll also see sort of safety services and others in here.
Okay. We'll come back to that in the coming meetings. Thank you, Chief Bloom. Okay, for the speaking on Reimagine School funding for a moment, just picking up on Dr. Alkin's clarifications on that document itself, just wanted to speak to 2 points. If you can just narrate over why Margarita Muniz is the school that's specifically mentioned in the rule sheet, just for the public understanding of that. And you can point folks with your screen share to where that is. The high school teacher ratio.
Yes. And we were torn between saying a ratio for dual language high schools or a ratio for the Muniz in particular. As our only dual language high school, the Muniz operates with a lower class size than our other high schools. So they need additional teachers to serve their student population than our other schools as a result of their dual language status.
Thank you. Also on that same sheet, we see that every school gets a principal, but there are no other restricted positions related to administrators. Can you clarify what the funding source is for schools with co-principals, and if the district has a position on whether schools need second administrators?
Yes. So I would say that the district sort of deeply believes in the need for administration in our schools, especially our larger schools, for support. I think this is definitely been an area of tension over the last few years of how much administration should be required in schools. Right now, our schools are required to hire additional administrators, whether it's co-principals or assistant principals, or curriculum directors or those sorts of things, using their flexible per pupil funding. At the high schools, a portion of that will come from the specific high school supplemental support amount, but at elementary schools, that might come from their base per pupil funding or from any of their other supplements. So these sort of flexible resources are what pay for additional administration in our school buildings.
Yeah, I would I would actually just also say that this is an area that we continue to look at, particularly in single admin buildings
Right.
that tend to be smaller. And where oftentimes like an instructional coach or some kind of quasi position functions as a second administrative set of hands in a way. There are some schools that by design in their innovation plan or their pilot plan or their horseman plan actually detail out a second administrator. And so this is like a legacy issue that we are kind of reviewing, looking at. But I do think that next year, we've been careful to say the reimagining is in the first year of what will be a 2 or 3 year rollout. We are going to want to look at this issue of the single building admin.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what the experience was from the perspective of those administrators, whether they feel like those quasi positions are meeting the need for support.
Exactly.
As a former leader of a single admin school, it was very challenging to be the only administrator in a building. So concerned about that. And while we're on that topic, maybe just an extension of that related to the formula that currently at high school, the only required guidance counselor is for grade 9. What's the district's position on that, especially when we're thinking about our priorities of preparation for post-secondary, and how are schools navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another one that we would be taking up in terms of the reimagining funding in year 2 to think about, since so many high schools are now 7-12. What do those middle grades look like for sure? I think what you see here is you see like the discretionary used in ways that are sometimes career oriented, in terms of career connector kinds of positions, or they may be more toward the social worker side, working kind of with the family unit. So you really see some differences in terms of how traditional guidance or school counseling was once approached. But this is another bucket that I think the reimagining committee had identified initially, and we want to be able to sort of pick this up as we think about the future rollouts.
Yeah, that's definitely an area of concern, as social emotional supports and resources outside of school and the things that some staff members can provide are so key, but they're not necessarily post-secondary planning. So I agree. And just staying on high schools for a moment, and I'm sorry I missed your earlier comments, Superintendent, anything regarding MassCore, but just wondering if you or Chief Bloom could narrate over how this budget connects to our ability to staff and schedule all high school students to meet MassCore requirements for next fiscal year, or the vast majority at least, or where do those two things intersect?
Yes, thank you so much for that. That was definitely an important priority in designing the formula. So the way we set this up was to be a sort of master schedule based allocation method for high schools, where in particular we built allocations on the assumption of a 6-period day, which is the most expensive of the models that our high schools run. So if a school runs a less expensive schedule model, then they actually get more flexible resources. But in particular, we're ensuring that there is teacher staffing for each of those 6 periods that a student needs throughout the day. And then the question becomes, how do we determine sort of what's the right mix of staff to make sure we have the MassCore supports? And that's where we lean heavily on our high school office and our school superintendents to help provide schools with guidance on how to meet that. I think the place where we've struggled the most in terms of the conversations that I've been a part of have been our situations where schools with large numbers of new immigrants and students who are learning English especially just struggle to find enough time in the day in 4 years to meet all the requirements and also offer all the ESL services that students need. And so I think that's where, to probably steal the superintendent's comment she's planning to make, we're doing master schedule reviews with those schools to see if it's more appropriate for them to maybe move to a 7-period schedule or something else that would, maybe a block schedule that would allow them to ensure students have the opportunity to graduate in 4 years with a MassCore diploma. But the resources are available. The question then becomes, how can we build our master schedule and hire the right mix of teachers to ensure that students have access to those resources? And that is just a very challenging question for some of our schools with students who have very complex needs.
Yeah, I think additionally, so I do think that was an example, as the state graduation requirements come out, like, or recommendations, I think, we've tried to underscore it's been an injection of resources into the high schools in order for them to be able to meet the art requirements, meet the elective requirements, meet the phys ed requirements. So those are all parts of, as David talked about, the probable orgs, that's where the regional soups working with the school leaders are doing kind of those checks and balances. But there have been, part of our budget is maintaining those things, where in past years, those might have been the things to be the first cut. So they are no longer elective, they are really core, as in MassCore. So I think it is definitely part of our check and balance in the budget process.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that there are some supports directly for schools in terms of which positions need to be purchased, allocated, and how they map out to the master schedule, because the formula doesn't say how many of what certain subject to buy. And so you can have enough funds and still not schedule all of your students appropriately. We have 3,000 fewer students than the last budget. Are we looking at the way we do enrollment projections going forward so that we have a greater sense of accuracy in the future, or is our enrollment projection model staying the same?
I would say largely the mechanism is staying the same. I think the thing we missed the most in this past cycle was how the past was not a good predictor of the future. Our enrollment projections look at primarily the last 3 years, but sometimes 5 years of enrollment data to determine the future year.
Yeah.
Going into school year 25, 26, we made those projections in October of 2024, the first round, right before Election Day 2024. And I think the thing we did not know exactly how to adjust for with those projections going straight into budget season was how much the election and the results would impact our enrollment. We actually did have some evidence from the last time that election result had happened. And in that case, it took about a year for us to see a real significant impact. And so with that level of uncertainty and the amount of new immigrant students we had been servicing in the prior years, we definitely decided, we made an active choice to sort of not adjust for a theoretical future change and maintain our methodology. I think that choice was the more conservative approach. And in hindsight, I mean, I don't know that we could have predicted the full extent of what happened, but we maybe could have been slightly less conservative. But I will say,
and when you say conservative, you don't mean conservative financially.
No, I mean conservative in ensuring that we had building out enough resources so that if the students had arrived, we were ready to serve them.
I understand. Thank you.
I mean, the other piece of that was that back when we did the projections in 2024, the state shelter system was in full swing. And that was actually a direct feeder to us, as many of the shelters were right here. That then completely kind of started to dry up, and that too then had the disparate impact in addition to what we would normally see for newcomers. I don't think any of the districts, us included, thought that the kind of swing we saw would happen that dramatically. And that's also just the reason why we have, to David's point, now projected much more dramatic decreases than we typically would.
Thank you. And kind of picking up on that theme of fiscal conservative practices, what's our level of confidence that the budget that's being proposed is not going to get us in a position next year where we have overspent mid-year, or that we have not accounted for unexpected increases in the way that we did this year? Are there different practices in terms of how we set aside funds for those types of emergencies? Are we estimating all of our increases to be higher than we typically did in the past? What are some of the fail safes that are being put in place this budget different from previous years?
Yeah, so this is the major thing we talk about regularly. There are some soft areas. Health benefits are one of them, because I think in general there's just uncertainty going forward at all levels. So for instance, any new FTEs that are created as part of this budget, that budget has to include their health benefits from the school side. That's a big change for the field, but that further insulates us from the swing. I think the additional of, again, to David's point of, it's not just about the 561 or the 531 and the vacancy delta, it's actually about elimination of actual positions as a way to further insulate and mitigate around the health bennies. Special education, there's active action plans right now in reviewing all areas. And I think, unfortunately, what we have seen, like other districts, is we've just seen the continued need for itinerant service the continued increase in autism and diagnoses, and that comes with the need to provide resources. So we are doing our best there to, educate as we write IEPs, looking at our resources, making sure they're going appropriately, and we'll continue that work at all levels of special education. Transportations, with the ridership policy, I think they've done an amazing job. They continue to try to insulate and mitigate against rising costs. But to be frank, we have an aging fleet. And that comes with cost as well in terms of maintenance, in terms of parts and those things. So those are the things that we're trying to build in to make sure that if we get hit with those things and inflation does not slow, that we will have enough buffer in the budget to be able to address it. And David, I don't know what else you would add.
No, I mean, I think you covered all the main points.
And picking up on that transportation piece, Superintendent, with the aging fleet and the presentation, there were also reasons for the $11 million increase, including the increase in door-to-door versus the investments to have a higher on-time rate. Chief Bloom, what's the biggest source of the increase? We talk about private placements, like we name a lot of different things that factor into the transportation budget, but what is the majority of the increase?
So over the longer term, the answer is required services and students' IEPs. So door-to-door transportation, out-of-district transportation, and one-to-one bus monitors. In particular, it's door-to-door transportation for students in district and one-to-one bus monitors that have fueled growth in recent years. In the most recent year, we did have a slightly higher percentage of the overrun that was due to offering some additional routes to build a little bit more flexibility in our schedule to improve on-time performance. And I think what we're doing sort of going into next year across transportation, but also special education and some other areas, is being a little bit more fiscally conservative now in our projections of spending, while also simultaneously pushing for significant efficiencies and reforms from those units to help us save money. And my goal is to bring at least one of those areas back to this body in December as an area of additional cost savings beyond expectations.
Thank you. And with my last few seconds, I just want to come back to the staff reductions, as obviously they're some of the most painful parts, along with school closings of reduced budgets, right? And picking up on Member Polanco Garcia's and Ms. Noor's questions, we obviously want to make sure that our permanent teachers have school placements where they can continue to impact students. And we've also really invested in recruiting and retaining a diverse set of provisional teachers. Is there any sense of priority that might be given to provisional teachers with certain skill sets or language or anything in terms of, I know that this is going to be a challenging year for provisional teachers. What is the approach to that? Or do we imagine we're going to lose some of those folks that we worked to get to the district this year?
One of the things we do as a part of our probable org process is we're actually collecting information on every provisional teacher who is losing a position in a school. Like each individual person, we're collecting information on them, including recommendations from their school leader to their colleagues, right? And so with provisional teachers especially, I think our focus is on making sure that we're communicating the staff who are available across schools so that folks who have vacancies are able to get those excellent teachers in the building right away. There will be areas, of course, where we have enough permanent educators to fill all vacant positions, in which case, the provisional teachers will have to come after that and might get non-renewed in June.
Yeah, I think this is an area that Chief Canty and OHC are actively working on. We actually spoke with school leaders today on it. I think it's everything from, working with our profs and encourage them to get other certifications in other areas that they may be able to do that. It's definitely encouraging our school leaders, even in the autonomous schools where they would have autonomy over staffing, to really look at teachers that are being accessed or teachers who are profs and paras, to be able to place them within the district as opposed to immediately going outside of the district to find talent. We've invested in our provisional teachers. We believe in them. There's a lot of professional development. They're familiar with our models. Many of them are multilingual at this point, and so it's really to our advantage to want to keep their skill sets within the district. So this is an area that Chief Canty has some thinking on. It's not ready to go live with, but she is definitely looking at this with her staff to see all that's possible.
And I will just add quickly, Vice Chair Scarrett, that there was one point I missed earlier in your question about FTE, which is if you look across our tables at the schools impacted by the long-term facilities plan, of the 426 position reductions in schools, 218 of those positions are coming directly from either school closures or grade reconfigurations. So it is more than half of the reductions are concentrated in a group of less than 10 schools that are impacted by the LTFP, which means the impact on remaining schools is much lower than it might seem originally.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Lots of good questions, and I know that you'll have a lot more specific information for us as we move forward. I just have a few questions that I'd like to ask. One is, as we're looking, I know that we've talked a lot about that. A number of the students that we're losing are at the high school level in terms of that decline. Has there been a look across every grade level to understand how each cohort is changing? And with that, my question is, for each grade level, how many classrooms are we funding that are less than 3/4 filled?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We definitely have to pull that particular data point for you, but we do look at cohorts of students, as we call them, by grade through the entire system. And what we are seeing is we have had several years of smaller cohorts of, the better part of a decade, of smaller cohorts of kindergarten students entering our system, right, as the number of resident births in Boston has decreased. And so those students are now aging through our system. The smaller cohorts there's a first round of smaller cohorts that's actually getting to high school now. That is a part of the high school reductions we're seeing. But there are then still continued reductions in cohort size that are coming through the system, right? There was a pandemic drop in birth rates, and those students are now kindergarten aged, right? My daughter was actually one of them, but this is sort of a part of what's happening in our system. And so I think as we have conversations about our district enrollment overall, I know, Chair, you were on the committee when we did the last big round of these sort of cohort analysis conversations with the committee, but we could certainly, have those conversations again.
And we're about to go into enrollment season as well. How are we going to look at enrollment and particularly placement as we're thinking about schools that have declining enrollment or excess class space for a particular grade level, et cetera, to be more strategic? I know that we talk about parent choice, but how can those choices be more strategic in terms of creating fuller schools where we need them?
Yeah, I think one example, Chair, is we have created an additional 10 K0 classrooms. One, because we had the space, and two, because frankly, we want those students to start early that are in K-0s out in the community. So this gave us the opportunity to be able to do that. I think to your point, it's looking at space as an advantage, looking at, how can schools market themselves as well and be able to show all of the wonderful things that they're doing. So that's been if you look on the website, there's definitely been a big push to get the profiles up and updated. Parents are noticing that. I think the fairs that we're having are also and meeting like out in the community. That's exactly where parents are talking about it. So really trying to do a bunch of different kinds of strategies to be able to get at this. Same with alternative ed. I think we're taking some advantage there of redoing redesigns to better meet the needs of the students that we have, and what the students have said that they want. So I think it's certainly not an exhaustive list, and this is one that we're going to have to continue to work with our school leaders on in buildings.
Another question I have is, how are we balancing the needs of adults versus students? I know we heard tonight about, specialized programming that the district has been supporting in the past that may or may not be able to do that. I know that we provide a large number of professional development activities for educators. I know many of those are funded by grants.
Mm-hmm.
But how are we looking at those programs, particularly if the majority of the funding in the past has come through district investment?
Yeah. So what I'll say is the number one message I heard as a central office department head versus as the CFO from the superintendent as we went into budget season is we are prioritizing student and family facing resources. And so that meant two things. First, when we were looking at what was on central budgets and what we would reduce, the priorities for cuts were on things that were more internal facing, either back office or adult facing. The second was, as we were thinking about strategic realignment, how can we ensure that we're pushing more and more of our positions to be facing out in the field, right, and impacting students and families directly. So I will say, that has been our priority through the central office budget process, and I think something that you'll see reflected in the upcoming budget.
Mm-hmm. Another question is about, we have a large number of different school designs, the autonomous schools, and how do the funding of each of these different programs with their specific guidelines impact when we step back and take a look at the per pupil cost in a particular school design versus another? How do we begin to look at what are our most cost effective school designs?
Yeah. What I would say is our most the biggest single driver for a cost effective school is size overall, more than program or autonomy, with some exceptions, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know the specialized programming at Madison Park or Boston Arts Academy are sort of marginally more expensive. But in general, the biggest driver of sort of efficient use of dollars in schools is school size. And so I think that's one thing we're looking at. The other thing that we talk about is size, not in terms of only the overall number, but what we would call the grade span, or not the grade span, the grade capacity. So one reason the high schools often feel richer than a K-8 is even at the same size, that because they're servicing fewer grades, they're able to have more students per grade, and that gives you additional flexibility, right? So elementary schools that have 3 classrooms in a grade level, right, just have more flexibility to use their resources. And there's also a limit to how inefficiently you can staff them, because eventually you would just drop down to 2 classes, right? Versus a school with 1 or sometimes even 2 classes, where if they don't get new students enrolling over the course of the K-6 experience, you see some of those inefficient, less than 75% full classrooms. When we pull that data for you, Chair, you'll see a lot of those classrooms are concentrated in the upper elementary grades. As students leave schools and then there aren't new students to replace them, and there aren't enough sections in the school to reduce the number of sections as the grades increase. So that is the biggest thing we're looking at as we think about our portfolio, is, at least from a cost effectiveness side, is the sort of the size of the school in the program.
My last question for tonight, it really deals with the fact that we've got a number of schools that are about to go through transition, either closing, etc. And my question is there any particular funding or any line items that are in addition for those programs as they go through these transitions that may or may not be available for other schools? And to the point of what we heard tonight with the Sarah Roberts, as they transition into their new reality, how do they come off of funding, or what kind of special dispensations are being given for how long in a transition?
Yes. So what I'll say is there are two main answers to that question. Number one is the vast majority of the capital planning department budget, or maybe not vast majority, but it's split about 50-50 between staffing who are supporting those transitions and non-personnel budgets to help pay for community activities and other events at schools in transition to give them services they need, especially for schools that are closing. For schools that are merging, right, like the new Frederick, what we're trying to get better and better at each year is clearly defining the timeline and exact resources that are covered by transition supports. So for next year for the Frederick, there are 2 positions that we are funding temporarily for 1 more year for specific reasons as they build out the program. So they are funded for a second family liaison temporarily, and a second coaching position. I believe it's either a second coaching position or a social worker. I'll have to double check.
Coach, transformation coach.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief Dawkins, coming in from the back row there. Yeah, so those positions are not allocated in the formula, but they have a very specific reason related to their transition to keep them for 1 year. And this is part of the benefit of returning to a formula, is a school has clarity about what the future will hold. So for example, with the Henderson community, we are trying to help them understand, what can you expect your K-8 budget to look like, right? So that you can know, okay, here are the resources we're cutting for next year as we don't have a 9th grade. Here are the resources we're going to have to cut from our high school because we're not going to be operating a high school long term. But actually, here's a large amount of resources that support the K-8 that will actually be able to stay. And while that doesn't mitigate the challenge of the transition from a K-12 to a K-8, right, the impacts on staff and students and families of that transition, it does bring some more clarity to where they're headed and allows those transition supports to be more specific and strategic because we know where we're going, versus just saying, here's what the combined budget of the 2 schools is, here's some estimates of things you can cut, here's how much of that we're going to let you keep for a little bit as we figure it out. Now that we actually have the formula to base it on, we can be more specific about that.
Thank you. Those are all of my questions for tonight. And again, on behalf of all of us, I just want to thank you for you and the entire team for all you've done to get us this far in the planning. So again, I want to remind the public that tonight marks the beginning of our comprehensive fiscal year 27 budget review process. We have a series of virtual public budget hearings scheduled over the next several weeks, starting on Thursday, February 12th at 5:30 p.m., where we'll focus on school level budgets. On Wednesday, March 4th at 5:30 p.m., we will focus on the central office budgets, and a general budget hearing on March 18th at 5:30 p.m. Please email your comments and feedback to budget@bostonpublicschools.org or contact the committee directly via their webpage at bostonpublicschools.org school committee. Your input is crucial as we discuss the superintendent's recommendations for the upcoming fiscal year. And the committee is set to vote on the fiscal year 27 budget on Wednesday, March 25th. Thank you all. And now we will return to public comment. Ms. Parvitz?
We have no public comments on the report.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any new business?
I'm not necessarily new, Chair, but I just wanted to, wearing my parent hat, express thanks to the custodial and facilities teams for their role in getting our kiddos back to school last Wednesday. A lot of work. And I have friends around the country whose students were home all week. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Alkins?
Yes, this is not related to anything we've discussed tonight, but I just on the heels of nationwide ICE protests, and I know that we have issued guidance to our district already on how to maneuver, so to speak. I'm just wondering if there, with the prospect of ICE in Boston, just is there any additional guidance that we might be giving to our staff and just guidance for families like as well?
Yeah. Superintendent, yeah.
Yes, and it's an excellent question. It's also really well timed. What I think we can do is for the next, we can prepare for you guys a memo, since we have only another hearing next, just to be able to get you some information timely, and then address it in a future school committee meeting when we're actually in a meeting.
Mr. Peralta?
Thank you so much, Robinson. Very quickly, I know the upcoming meetings, we are gonna be very focused on the budget conversation, but I wouldn't want us to lose sight of the schools that are that are closing or merging. So I would encourage the superintendent, maybe not in every meeting, but every other meeting, once a month, something like that, to give us some updates on how these transitions are going and what we are doing for the students and the school communities at large. I was just reflecting, I was thinking on, we voted today to approve the Elliott Innovation School model for the next 5 years. And as I was reading through it, seeing that a school that a decade ago was serving 324 students and was failing, and 10 years later is a school with almost 800 students that is a model for the district, for the state, for the country, if you want. It's just give me a lot of hope that this is doable. Like we can have these students going to other schools, and we can focus resources and having larger studying body and serving them well. And I hope that we can go through that road with the students that their schools are being closed this year. Thank you.
Chair, may I for a minute? So happily, Member Peralta, the capital planning team's been incredibly busy. In fact, they've been holding school fairs where they've had principals they've surveyed the students and families. At the high schools, they've figured out which schools they're most interested in and attending, and then they bring in the leaders and staff from those schools, and they do a fair on site at that school. They just did it at the Henderson. So I will ask capital planning to write something up for you, and then we can talk about it again, much like Dr. Alkins' question at the next full school committee meeting.
Thank you so much, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, that concludes our business for this evening. Our next meeting will take place on Thursday, February 12th at 5:30 p.m. The session will serve as both a budget hearing and a regular meeting. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Parvitz, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Peralta,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia,
Yes, good night.
Ms. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you, everyone.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thanks.